And welcome back to the Book and Life podcast. You're on with your host, Crystal Fleming. And I've got one of the toughest, awesomest English crime authors coming on today. And I am sure he's going to have a lot of you guys rush into the stores once you hear all about his stuff. At least he did with me. So, before that, we've got our usual advert for Marianne Curley's The Shadow Time Guardian Book 4. So you guys know the drill. The war is over, the battle is over, the war is won, and the prophecy complete. But life can't just pick up where it left off for Ethan, struggling to cope with tragic loss at odds with friends in the guard. He finds himself adrift, jumping at shadows and sensing someone who can't possibly be there. Blaming herself for the goddess Athea's death, Giselle swears revenge and fulfills the immortals' plan for world domination. But Giselle hadn't planned on love. And that leaves her with an unbearable choice. Should she follow her heart on the strings of a goddess, short on praise but high on expectation, who continues to pull her from the grave? As the guard and the order battle through the past and into a possible future, darkness lurks around every corner. The fight for the world's survival rests with one. Is it friend or foe who stands in the shadow? So, with that being said, I have the deep honor and privilege to welcome this amazing English crime novelist, to whom I very much admire from what I've been able to research and read. So please welcome Mike Craven. Please tell me I said that right, because my accent sometimes
Craven.
Craven, thank you. I do this a lot. See, I think I get it right, and then I come on and I totally butcher it. So yeah, that's the joy of doing a podcast, is you don't always get it right. So, seems to happen more with me. Actually, I have better luck with English names than I do with American. American, I tend to really be bad at. So come on, tell us what is exciting you at the moment. What are you excited about releasing or have released or are writing right now?
I'm in a sort of weird period. I have just released a book a week and a bit ago.
Yeah,
it was quite a cool book because it was in my Poe and Tully series, which is what I'm known for. But it was a novella. It was a 20,000 word novella, and it was commissioned as part of an adult literacy program in the UK called Quick Reads, which is designed to get adults back into reading, particularly aimed at people who don't have English as a first language, so they maybe aren't as familiar with English books as perhaps they would like to be. And for adults with low levels of literacy, and as I used to be a probation officer, that's something quite close to my heart anyway. And it was quite a challenging process. There was a lot of editorial restrictions which I wasn't used to. So the things like there was no contractions, so it was do not instead of don't, and which to me felt quite unnatural. But if English isn't your first language, some of it would be confusing. Those restrictions on how many words of 3 syllables and above you could use, and the plot had to be simple, and you had to keep on repeating names of characters a lot more than I would have done. But it was a lot of fun, and it was out with some huge authors, Graham Norton and Kate Moss and Paula Hawkins, and some absolutely fantastic authors. So that was out, a week last Thursday. Mm-hmm. And the big event for me of the year is the new Poe novel. It's Poe 5. It's out on the 2nd of June, and it's The Botanist. And the early reviews have been very, very positive. So I'm looking forward to getting that out into the wild.
Well, I look forward to adding it to my spotlight, because I do a spotlight once a month where I take a group of books that I've read and then I spotlight it. And it's on my list to be in the spotlight for this year. And I'm actually putting you in with Fiona Cummings, funnily enough.
Yeah, I know Fiona.
So you'll probably know who she is.
Yeah, I'm doing an event with her, actually. She's coming up to my hometown, and we're doing an in-person event middle of May, a couple of weeks' time, actually. So that'll be a lot of fun. I've known Fiona for a few years now. She's a friend of mine.
she's I had her on and we had such a fun time talking because we had so many things in common that it just made it a really good chat, because that's the whole point of this, is kind
Mm,
of strip away the myth and debunk a lot of myths about authors. And because we're people, we've had lives before we became writers, and
mm,
it's kind of really about showing people that, hey, we put our pants on one leg at a time just like everybody else. It's not like we have servants running around after us, or any of that rubbish.
not yet,
We
anyway.
do everyday life stuff. We wash dishes and we go to supermarkets and we stand in queues just like everyone else. So it's good, and she thoroughly enjoyed it because she's like, it's a great chance to just talk books and rubbish for
Mm.
an hour and a half and lose yourself. So yeah, and I was actually excited because I found you fascinating when I started researching you, because you were a name that she suggested. And I was like, I have to know more. And, as you said, you're a probation officer, so that must have fed into what you were doing as well, and why you maybe chose the genre you did, if I'm not mistaken.
Sort of, yes. It sort of, commercially it made sense. I mean, because when no, well, I mean, with very few exceptions, then usually if you're a celebrity, you start off with nothing. You don't have an agent, you don't have a
Yeah.
publisher. So I took a very commercial. Well, actually, I did for two reasons. One was it was my preferred genre that I read anyway. So I was a big Michael Connelly fan before I started to write crime fiction, a big Ed McBain
Yeah.
fan, and so on. But also from a commercial point of view, I thought it's going to be much easier to just sort of stick my head above some of the other submissions by saying I am, because at the time I was an assistant chief probation officer, so I was in charge of an entire county.
Wow.
Yeah. So that sort of it gave you writing a bit of credibility, or that's what I thought would happen. I mean, in the end, I sort of went in the direction of sort of over the top crime books. So I don't really talk about the type of things that Fiona and other authors do exceptionally well. I tend to go for the over the top serial killers and the outlandish cartoonish villains and things. And I just have a bit of fun. Crime writing plus, my editor calls it. But certainly being a probation officer was why I sort of, right, I'm going to start with crime, because I could have went with fantasy. Actually, I love fantasy books as well. So I mean that was always.
So do I. Yeah.
Yeah, it was all, and I mean I like lots of books. I like some science fiction stuff. I'm a big fan of an author called Nathan Lowell, who's I think he's a
Yep.
self-published
Know
author
the name. Yep.
from the States, and he writes a series set in his own little universe, which is exceptionally well realized. And so I like a whole bunch of books, but crime writing made the most sense to me, just to kick off and have somewhere to start, I suppose.
And you see, I'm just venturing in, so I started off in romance because I actually started off in wrestling. So
Right.
everyone looks at me funny when I say that, but wrestling actually has writers, which most people don't know.
Nice.
And I had to work with these burly men who were all huge and big, and I'm 5'1", and I weigh less than 100 pounds, soaking wet. So I had learned skills very quickly that A, how to work with them, B, how to not upset them, which is a lot harder than people realize, but also to convince them that what I'm writing for their character is worth the time and putting their bodies on the line to do it.
Mm.
And it taught me really good, deep point of view. So, like, all my characters have a lot of layers, a lot of deep rooted backstory, and you feel like they're normal people in a way. You can connect to them because you understand them and you can almost see where they're going. And a friend of mine said, Crystal, you've got one of the darkest, twisted minds sometimes. Why don't you try crime? And I was like, it's been a work in progress for about 6-7 years, because obviously jumping from romance to crime is huge. It's not an easy leap. So I started working with a detective in America who's on the first 48 hours. He's retired now. And that sort of helped a little bit, I would say, to kind of find my feet and get, I chose a case that I knew that I'd listened to and I'd watched, and I used that as a very loose foundation. And then I took it and I set it in the remote islands of Shetland, which I knew really well because that's where I lived and I grew up. And crime up there is very different to crime down here. So it kind of tickled my sense of humor of why don't I go and kill some people in Shetland and get away with it, kind of on the written page.
I mean, and
it was a bit more fun for me.
She writes her series set in Shetland, which makes it it looks like it's one of the most dangerous places to live in the UK.
Yeah,
which of course isn't. It's the same with Cumbria. Actually, Cumbria is has one of the lowest crime rates in the country. But I write about serial killers and all sorts of weird stuff going on up here. So I mean, you just
it's weird. The low crime areas has the best writers, I think, because Marzi Taylor, she's a crime writer and she sets all hers on sailing boats, which I think is a bit of an odd one if you think about it. Because like, how can you commit a crime on a sailing boat and get away with it? Somebody has to have seen something, and there's not that many people to kill on a sailing boat. So I always think, I find her work interesting for that regard because it's a very different place.
I mean, it's just
you wouldn't necessarily think
she's
of that.
Just doing what Agatha Christie did, just giving you a country house, an isolated location with a finite group of suspects. I mean, that's in effect, and that's been done and will always be done
to death. Yeah,
cool way of writing books, and for some readers, that's what they like to know who it could be, and then try and work it out ahead of the detective. That's fine. I mean, that's not what I write. Mine tend to be more road trippy, like so they'll go from one place to the next, following the evidence. Wherever.
That's why I'm drawn to yours in a way, because I'm somebody that usually works out who's done it very quickly, and then I lose all interest because I'm like, well, I know who's done it, and it's just frustrating that you guys can't, the characters can't see it, so I just end up getting very frustrated with it, which is why I love Fiona Cummings, because I never know who's done it with her, and it sort of drives me slowly insane.
You just don't know why, which is just cool, obviously. But I mean, with mine, with the puppet show, which was the first one, I reckon about 20% of people, maybe a bit less, worked out who the villain was, but not so much why. With Black Summer, the second one, one person said they did, but they were lying. And then
there's no way they could have.
It sort of fluctuates. The botanist actually is an interesting one. I'll be interested to see what people make of that, because I that's the first one where maybe the character isn't actually on screen; he's off screen for a while, so you can't work it out. Then in the Mercy Chair, which is the one that's out probably not until back end of 2023 now, the way things are panning out.
COVID's kind of screwed us all up on publishing.
Nobody will get that one. But it's good, and I like to try and get ahead of the detective. I never beat Bosch, Harry Bosch.
You try though. You try.
Oh yeah, it's fun trying. And some of my other favourites as well. I mean, some of my favourites like Don Winslow and Dennis Lehane and Carl Hiaasen. It's not so much the who did it; it's just the why did it and what happened after they did it and all that type of stuff. A lot of it's to do with covering stuff and things, which is. You
were one of, because when I started, I had looked up you before, and I hadn't actually realised I'd looked into you before, because my brother loved serial killers. He went through this sort of weird phase when he was 16 of being really into serial killers. And it wasn't until I started looking at going into writing that I started looking at all different kinds of books and stuff. And I remember your name popping up, and I thought, ooh, okay. And I never got the opportunity to read yours because at that time I was a bit of a scaredy cat, I'll admit. But now, because I've ventured in and I've spent a lot of time with an actual detective, who, by the way, has still not worked out who the murderer is in my book, so I don't know how I've managed that. But he kind of opened my mind to, like, serial killers don't always have to make logical sense, Crystal. Some people are very emotionally driven or very narcissistic or very kind of in themselves. So don't worry about it. Just worry about building the story. And it's weird to hear a police officer say, we actually have to construct the story to get a conviction. Kind of baffled me a bit. Like, I didn't think that was their way about going to get, like, put the case together. Because they were like, well, what makes sense in a story that we can then sell to the DA? And then the DA can go prosecute. And I was like, I never thought of it like that. Have you kind of had those kind of conversations?
Well, I mean, I used to go to meetings with the chief constable and all sorts when I was in probation, and I mean, the reality is a lot of the cases that we dealt with were just nasty, banal, violent offences, which were very, very quickly solved, because it was the husband killing his wife, or it was a drug debt, or something like that. A lot of violent assaults, obviously, and domestic violence, and all sorts of horrific stuff.
Yeah, you would have had all sorts. Yeah.
When it comes to a trial, the particularly jury trials, because not every trial in the UK is a jury trial. You can be tried by magistrates. You can always elect to have a jury trial, but you don't necessarily have to have one if your offence, and there's certain types of offences have to go to Crown Court and be tried in front of a jury. But the jury wants to hear a story. They want to know why it happened. They want to know why it happened as well as what happened. And if they don't understand the why, which is the story, then they sometimes have a problem convicting sometimes, because obviously a defendant is going to be saying, I didn't do it, it was someone else. And if the prosecution say, it was him, but they haven't explained why he did it, then clearly the motive is missing, and motive is an important part of any offence. Now, obviously, some crimes are motiveless or seemingly motiveless. And I explore that in the Poe and Tilly books, because one of their remits in my story is they look for serial killers and apparently motiveless crimes. I mean, very few crimes are motiveless, even if the motive seems absolutely ridiculous to people with an ounce of common sense. They this is probation coming out again. Before you do anything, you do a cost-benefit analysis. So you just had a cup of a drink of your tea there. You'll, without even realising, you'll just went through a micro process of cost-benefit. As I'm thirsty, but do I have to talk? No, I don't think I'm going to have to talk. So you've done a very, very quick analysis of that action there, and most people will go through thousands of those a day without realising. And obviously, some of the bigger decisions that you have to make, you'll go through a more complex process, and that's the same with committing offences. Even if we used to go through an exercise with violent offenders, particularly ones in pubs and things like that, and they would say, I couldn't help it. He stood on my foot and I just lashed out. And when you drill down to it, you said, well, if it was a 5-year-old girl who had stood on your foot, would you have lashed out? And they'll say no. And they'll say, well, therefore you made a decision. It might have been a very, very, very quick decision, but you made a decision that you were going to hit that person rather than not hit that person. And that's all motive is. It's some of it is a well thought out motive, and some of it is done very much in the heat of the moment. But everyone makes a decision to do something, unless it's a genuine accident like death by dangerous driving or something like that, when you were just speeding. You didn't obviously intend to kill somebody, but it was your action.
I have a very kind of, I don't know if I'm jaded, but I think if you're dangerous driving, you're making a conscious decision to drive dangerously.
The end result wasn't what you intended. It's the same with drunk drivers. You're clearly culpable for what happened, and it is your fault, but the intent wasn't there. You didn't make a decision to go out and hurt someone. You made a decision to drive 30 miles over the speed limit, or to have 5 pints behind the wheel of a car. And then you do get into the I mean, it's an interesting one, actually, because if you say I was so drunk, I didn't know what I was doing, that's not a defence in English law. But
No, and it's not here either.
if you have a mental health condition, and you do something, you said, well, I didn't know what I was doing, then that is a defence in English law. So, I mean, it's a bit,
Yeah.
it's incredibly complex when it comes to things like that. And it's something that, as crime writers, you can explore, because a lot of what you want to do is conflict.
Yeah, exactly.
And exploring conflict is an integral part to each book. So I mean, there's conflicts in all my books. I mean, it might not be with a major crime; it might just be Poe kicking back against authority, or being told not to investigate a certain crime, and he's just going to do it anyway. But conflict is
he says, "Oh, sod it, I'll go for it." Yeah,
crime book. I mean, it's just because conflict.
So when it comes to your inspiration, do you look at cases that's maybe going on in the world as a sort of source of kind of touching base with what crime's like now, or is it just like you get these ideas?
I just get ideas out of nowhere. I don't look at. I mean, sometimes some current events will spark an idea, but very rarely will I look at true crimes for inspiration, because that's not the type of thing I do. I think there are other authors doing it far better than I ever could. And I enjoy reading them, but it's not something I particularly want. And that might be just because probation. It would just be a bit like going back to work almost. Because I mean, some of the reports that we had to write because we as probation officers, you write pre-sentence reports, which advise on sentencing, and they look at motivation and things that might be done to stop offending in the future, that type of thing. So it's a big risk assessment, but it's also part of history of what happened, the history of like a biography of the offender's life, that type of thing. Now, when you're writing that, some of those, particularly on some of the complex and serious, they can run to 14, 15 pages. And to me, writing a novel based on something like one of those offences would have just been like writing a pre-sentence report. That's how it would have felt to me. So I tend to make up something outlandish, and then I mean, the way I process it in my mind, I start with a crime. I'll work out the motivation for the crime, because, like I said, everyone makes a decision for something. So you'll never get somebody just cutting off somebody's noses just because they want to. There'll be a reason why they're cutting off someone's noses.
Yeah.
And don't steal that idea. That's going to be in Poe 9, probably.
Don't worry, I will.
So I'll have the crime. I'll have the location where it's going to happen, and then I'll basically throw Poe and Tilly at it, and I'll say, right, go and solve it. And that's what I'll do. So I'll sort of start at the end, and I'll go back to the beginning, then we'll meet in the middle somewhere.
Because it was so weird for me. I actually came up with my idea, and then the detective I was talking to, he's like, you do realize this murder's already happened here, right? And I went, no.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to go look at the case, because it totally like threw me in a way. I was like, oh, for mine, an entire branch of a family gets wiped out, but all that's left is the children that can't talk, the ones that can't identify or can't, So it's a very brutal, essentially, crime. And it's the opening one to my series. And he laughed at me. He goes, how do you not know that this has happened in Ohio? And I went, because I don't follow American news. Like, you got to remember, I stay in Scotland where we don't get, like, your news. So I then went and I watched it. And do you know they still can't solve it?
Really?
And with what's out there and what you can see on the news, I'm thinking, how are you not putting this together? The media is telling you what the motive is. So how are you not putting these final pieces together? And even he reckons it's been botched. But yeah, it was so weird to have that kind of moment of, oh, somebody's already, so this has already happened and I didn't even know about it. And I always been baffled, and it's so nice to have somebody that I can talk to about crime and not feel like silly, almost, because I like to dive into stuff. But I've never understood, and maybe you can explain this to me, but in the Highlands and Islands particularly, people are getting away with mutilation and really serious assaults and they're only getting like 235 days unpaid labor. They're not going to prison. So these people are getting re-released onto the streets. And I'm thinking, if you know that these people have done offenses maybe one or twice, why are you re-releasing them into the Shetland community? Like, all you're causing is xenophobia and fear among the community. I always wondered about that, and I wondered if you can maybe explore that, because I know that in the Highland and Islands is a question that's asked quite a lot, and maybe you can give us some insight from your point.
I mean, I'm not as familiar with Scottish law as I am with England, the law in England and Wales, but they're fairly similar. And it's there's very few exceptions where the state has the authority to bar somebody from a place. And invariably it will be, in fact, legally it has to be a prison sentence over a certain amount of time. When that happens, then the victim has a say on whether they want the victim back in their area. And if they say no, then the perpetrator will have to relocate some there.
Yeah, which is kind of hard in Shetland. Yeah.
Well, that's just their tough. I mean, we've had people who couldn't come back to Carlisle. Their entire family was in Carlisle. Their entire life had been in Carlisle, but they'd committed an offence against a resident of Carlisle, and they weren't allowed back in Carlisle. And they couldn't understand it either.
Wow.
But I live in Carlisle, so well, not anymore. You don't.
Where
do I live? We say that's not our problem to a certain degree. We'll help you
find somewhere. Yeah,
by putting you in a hostel to start with, the probation hostel out of county, and then they will help you relocate to where you live now. And particularly for life sentences, because a lot of people don't understand how life sentences work in the UK. So if you get a life sentence, you are always under the control of the state, even after you have been released, and you can be recalled to prison for
nearly anything, isn't it?
For not doing anything really, for risk. So when I was managing life sentence prisoners, when they were out in the community after they served the custodial part of their sentence, we would look at their behaviour as a sort of a holistic thing. So it wasn't just their criminality; it was their drinking and their drug use and their mental health. And if their drinking or drug use and mental health deteriorated to the point where we think actually this is now a risk factor, we would just whip them back to prison. We don't have to go back to court. In fact, it was me, because I was the assistant chief. I would just sign a bit of paper, and the police would go out and pick them up, and they'd go back to prison for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And have to go through the release process all over again. So that for people like that, they will never ever be allowed back into their home county. When they had to go back for, say, the death of a relative or something, then there would be an entire process they would have to apply. So normally it would be a probation officer from the county where they live would get in touch with us, say such and such wants to come back. Will you even consider this? And then we go through a process, and we talk to the police, and we make sure, and we tell the victim such and such might be coming back to attend a funeral. Or the victim's family, obviously, if it's a murder case. And if they say no, then that's pretty much it, to be honest. If they say yes, then the police might escort them and things like that. So it can be done, but it's only for the extreme cases.
Yeah.
In the Highlands, then obviously you're talking a fairly small pool of people, where everyone knows each other.
It's crazy.
And it's sort of similar to Cumbria. Actually, Cumbria is there's a couple of cities, but most of the time it's little like clannish villages and small towns, which everyone knows each other. Nobody really goes outside their village. And every now and then a violent fellow will go to prison for a couple of years, and he'll come back out and he'll hit someone and he'll go back in. So some of these people just revolve in place, really. I mean, it's so. But I know obviously I mean, we don't have it to the extent the Americans do with the 3 strikes and you're out. So if you keep on committing low-level offences, you're going to keep on getting low-level punishments. If you keep on committing assaults, and eventually you're going to go to prison, you're not going to get your unpaid work, your community service as it used to be called. And
I was just very surprised.
We have a more measured approach, I think, to punishment in the UK, and I think part of that is we don't actually have a for-profit penal system like the I was reading an article set in, I think it was Texas, about how this guy had he'd borrowed $7.5 million and he'd made $150 million in like 3 years because he basically he didn't bribe a judge, he didn't do anything illegal, but he courted the judge to send young men his way. So I mean, people in that particular judge's court were getting sent to prison far more much
regularly,
than other things. So we don't have that in the UK. Even the for-profit prisons, they get paid to run a prison. It doesn't matter if they're full or empty.
Who's in it?
To their bottom line.
And I just always thought it was fascinating because I grew up with this idea that if you're a Shetlander, you kind of get a free pass in our court system in Shetland. But if you're an outsider, you get sent away. It was just always the unfairness of it growing up baffled me because it was one sheriff.
Yeah, there could have been a bit of that because obviously it's a tourist, and I mean, and there's a commercial thing on that actually. I mean, the Shetland is heavily reliant on tourism, obviously.
It is, yeah.
And if tourists stop coming because it's a bloodbath every night in the pubs, then Shetland will lose a lot of money. So they will go hard on tourists, and it's not just Shetland that it happens. Certainly around in the lakes, Lake District, where we're from, very touristy, like 20 million visitors a year. It's the most visited place in the UK, the Lake District. And if you come over and cause trouble, you are going to be treated harshly by the courts. There's and it's part of it.
It's strange.
Does have a deterrent element built in. Whereas if you're a Shetlander, that deterrent thing doesn't need to be taken into account. So you could well get short sentences. Yeah.
I mean, because we had a murder. It would have been about 2 years now because I'd literally just moved up, and it was a drug debt. And these two had come up from south, and it was the most ridiculous case you've ever heard of. It really was. These two came up, and they killed this girl very publicly in the square of her housing area, so all her neighbors saw. And then they tried to rob a guy 30 minutes later with the same knife they killed her with. And they're covered in blood. And I'm thinking, really? Like, you're just asking to get picked up. You know? And every Shetlander... the Shetlanders told the police what had happened before the police knew.
Yeah, never underestimate the stupidity of criminals. I had these two lads on probation once. This is going back a few years when I was actually a probation officer. When I was actually working face-to-face with clients. And they were doing okay. And so I got a call from the police saying such and such. Both of them had been picked up for armed robbery, which is obviously a serious offence in the UK as it is everywhere. So they went through the court process. And before sentence, I had to go to Durham Prison to interview them. And I said, why'd you do it? And they said, we needed money to pay our fines. And I was like, just stupid like that. And
it's a bit backwards.
Without offence, they just, when they went outside, they realised they didn't have gloves. So they took their socks off and put their socks over their hands. So they went in like with sock puppets. Then they ditched their jacket on the way out because they thought they were wearing distinctive jackets, which they were. But they had letters to probation appointments. They left them in the thing. So they actually basically left their name and address in the thing. So they were picked. I think the police were waiting for them at home when they arrived. And they got 4 years for that. And you think, well...
That's a bit mental, isn't it?
There's some stupidity that you can't clever somebody up. So I can do all the offending programs I want. I could say you need to think and all this stuff. Stop, think. Is that a fact, opinion, or a guess? That all these types of tools that we would put in their sort of cognitive toolbox. But you can't make someone cleverer than they are. If they're stupid, they're going to do stupid things. I mean, that's just the nature of stupidity, isn't it?
And I just, in some respects, living in Shetland is good because it's 60-mile long island. So there is nothing like your car gets nicked or insurance jobs just doesn't happen because guess what? Where are you going to take the freaking car? You can't get it off the island.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to know it's you that's speeding around like an idiot. So I loved growing up in that regard. But what always troubled me when I sort of hit my 20s was looking and seeing the level of children crime that was happening, I grew up with hidden domestic crime. You know, myself, I was a hidden domestic violent victim. And because it was such a small island, you know, things like Women's Aid didn't work the way it should have. And there was very little proper protection in place for people, particularly like me. And it wasn't until I moved away with a guy from Glasgow, right? So I went from an island of semi-low crime to the east end of Glasgow, which was a eye-opening experience, if I'll ever say. And I kind of realized then that, you know, me covering for somebody that was a violent guy was ridiculous. And it was almost like I learned it was okay to open up. But that level of you have to fear the police in Shetland for girls, not for boys, but for the girls, is so high. It's ridiculous. You honestly get it drummed into your head as a teenager. Fear the police. Don't talk to the police. If you talk to the police, everyone will know. And they'll make you out to be a liar because they don't want crime to be the topic in islands. And, you know, if you're stupid enough to be with a guy who beats you, well, guess what? That's on you. And that was the attitude. And I thought, like, and another way of doing this podcast is to say, hey, you know, I'm holding you, the island sort of, you know, attitude is responsible, because you never know how many women up there are actually struggling with that kind of thing, or how many teenage girls are struggling with that. So I'm kind of hoping that through this, at least, it might make them feel like, yeah, you know what, there is girls out there that believe you. And if I'd been wiser, I would have known all the girls in my class knew that I was being beaten and abused, and I would have probably opened up sooner. But it's that level of community fear that's just, that exists there. Do you find that in your area?
Yeah, certainly. Because I worked in West Cumbria, and that very much had a sort of Shetland feel to it. It was isolated, and there was a lot of violence against women. There was a lot of violence against men, but there was. I remember a guy while he was being arrested for beating his wife. He was telling the police, this has got nothing to do with you, even though his hands were covered in blood and his wife was unconscious on the floor. And that attitude, it's getting better, obviously, but it's not getting better fast enough. And some of the things that the Me Too movement highlighted are still prevalent, particularly in the sort of shadows and corners of the UK, where perhaps they don't have access to all the services like Women's Aid that you mentioned, and victim support, and all this type of thing. And if you're in the Shetlands and you want to still live in the Shetlands, then everyone is going to know your business. I mean, that is just a fact, isn't it? You can't unless you got one of those like Men in Black neuralizers.
That would have been so helpful as a teenager.
You live in Glasgow and you want to stay in Glasgow, you can just move to a different part of Glasgow and you can melt into it, and you can invent a new life.
Exactly.
Or if you live in Glasgow, you're probably just as happy living in London or Birmingham or something. But if you live in the Shetlands and you like that way of life, then what do you do? I mean, some people are just put in horrific positions where they have to choose between the life that they want to live or their physical safety, potential death.
And that was a decision I had to make. I actually said to my partner, we'd only been dating a week, and I said to him, I don't think I could stay here. I think he's going to kill me if he finds out that I'm with you. And it was that moment where I kind of had that conscious click of, I have to protect myself because nobody else is going to. Was a really big movement for me. And I got on the back of his motorcycle and I rolled the dice because, you know, I've only dated this guy a week. You know, I've been talking to him for 3 months online, but this guy could be a complete psycho and I might not know it. And I rolled the dice and I went to Glasgow, and it was like the biggest relief almost, because I could finally just sort of break the silence on everything that I'd held in from 13. So it was like, and it was weird because I was then able to tell him, this guy's stalking me. He showed up in Glasgow twice. And, you know, I got so scared. And then I finally said to him, I'm like, he showed up twice. And it was such a relief for him to turn around and say, you know what, don't worry about it. You're in Glasgow. You've got, you know, family all throughout Glasgow. You're safe. You know, he's not going to touch you. And it broke that spell that I had lived with for like so many years. And it was such a good thing. And that's why I say to women, sometimes you have to just completely walk out the door, slam it shut, and just keep trying again. Because it's worth it.
I used to get asked all the time, why do women stay with their abusers? And it's an incredibly complex subject. And the answer is going to be different for every single victim. Is going to have the motivations for staying or leaving or whatever.
So it's usually complex ties. It's like, you know, you're scared that it's going to be worse.
I dealt with a case. I won't tell you where because the listeners might be actually identify it. But it was a small town in Cumbria where the guy, the woman was on probation to me actually because she'd been caught shoplifting.
Of course.
When I drilled down to it, it was because her husband would only give her enough money to buy the groceries. So he made her stay at home, but basically kept her a financial prisoner. And she tried to leave him, and he was incredibly violent to her. So she left him and did all the right things that people would say she did all the right things. She went to a charity. They rehomed her. But they put her in an unfurnished house or a very sparsely furnished house with little things.
Yeah.
She was on benefits. She went from living in a big house in a nice market town to living on an estate somewhere. Her children went with her because that's what they did. And they were there about a week and they were like, sod this. They didn't like it.
Go back to dad,
They went back to the father, who lived in the big house and was a very well-respected member of the community. He was captain of the rugby team and blah, 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 blah. Nobody believed the words she was saying because it was just one of those, I want to believe the captain of the rugby team to be an honourable man, that type of thing. And in the end, she went back to him because she missed the children. She would rather just go. She would rather live. In her mind, what she was being put through was better than not being with her children. So, I mean, to say
it's the ties. It is the ties.
You can't say it's certainly not a binary choice. That
no, it's not.
Women have when they're in violent or abusive relationships.
And I think this is it's good because Fiona and I talked about this and I do this sort of thing where this is an inclusive podcast. So it's for everybody. It's not, I don't just have on bestsellers. I have on new authors. I have on disabled authors because you'd be surprised at how many disabled authors actually struggle with getting published, getting out there. I've seen publishers turn down people with learning disabilities all the time. And it's for the stupidest reasons. If you're dyslexic, you got a 97% chance that you've got a more uphill battle than anybody else. And I know that for a fact. So that was another reason for starting this, was to kind of be able to have these open conversations, but in-depth conversations with people from all over the world, from all circumstances. And I think it's really good. And I think it's going to hopefully maybe change a lot of people's opinions. And to be able to hear from you, in particularly, kind of what you've done and what you've seen and what you've worked through, is probably going to inspire quite a lot of people to either change their lives or, tell their stories. And I think that's incredible. And to have you on is such an honor for that reason.
It's I mean, publishing is well. Thank you for that, obviously, but there are more and more places that will help, but these places are still going to struggle to find their ways to the sort of outer edges of the UK. But I think what you said about publishing is interesting because I think it has been predominantly dominated, which is an awful way of talking. It's been dominated by white authors. I mean, that's pretty much.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Yeah,
and that, well, I don't think that wasn't a conscious decision. I just thought. I mean, it's a business at the end of the day, and for a while, authors, non-white authors, were struggling to make money, and that wasn't the author's fault, and it wasn't the book's fault. It was the fact that the publishers,
the market really,
and marketing were from the same background as the people that they were. So they weren't sure how to market them. So they weren't. But I think they're getting better. They've sort of recognised that now.
They're more inclusive now than what they were.
Publishers will take a risk on authors a lot more than they would actually, because I mean, my publisher. Not every author makes their money, but as long as the bottom line is in the black instead of the red, then I think it's pretty much it's all good, and that's a great thing. And there's some fantastic opportunities being given to sort of non-traditional authors, and I sort of include myself in that, because I mean, for a while, working class authors, particularly from the north of England, weren't really considered as a viable option for publishing. But now there are a lot of us, to the point it feels like we don't need to be given that chance anymore and move over. Let's get another non-traditional
area in,
give them their turn as well. We don't need to sort of be given special treatment anymore.
Do you think that maybe Catherine Cookson played a role in bringing more North English authors into like more prominent positions? Do you think that because she was Northern and she really broke a lot of barriers? Catherine Cookson? Because she's not too far from where you were, right?
She's not. No, she's only a half-hour drive. I don't know. I really don't know, because the stuff that she used to write about, which was very much working class, the colliery villages and all that type of stuff. I don't know enough about her background to know if she was actually one of those. Whether
she did do crime, but she did crime in a different way. Yeah.
I don't know who's broke down the barriers, actually. I really don't know. It used to be a very London-centric business.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Now it isn't so much. Now most of the big publishing houses have satellite offices throughout the UK. So my publisher, Hachette, my umbrella publisher, has offices all over. They have Newcastle and Edinburgh and Manchester and all sorts of places now. To try and catch that talent that is all over the country, because the talent isn't just in London. And you wouldn't have known that. It did look like that for a while, because it was only London authors getting published.
That's very true. Yeah.
And I suppose technology made it easier for authors to sort of
explode out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just to sort of try to submit easily and think, just the same way that the pandemic forced us all onto Zoom, which opened up a load of opportunities for. You mentioned disabled authors. I mean, there was festivals that were online the last couple of years that were always in person, which were pretty much inaccessible for some disabled people, and for some people who maybe didn't have the funds, couldn't afford to go to Harrogate for 4 nights and pay £300 for tickets and hotels and packages and things.
It's the same with Bloodfest here.
We could just look online, log in, maybe pay tenner for a whole weekend's worth of entertainment, and a bit of see and talk to their favourite authors.
Exactly, yeah.
Sometimes it does take something like a pandemic, or I don't mean that. I mean, I think for social movements to start. So the Black Lives Matter obviously started. There was obviously there wasn't one single event started that, but there was one event that sort of brought it to a head. And the Me Too movement in the UK started. Well, I mean, it started everywhere, but
that was a very
groundswell of sort of anger, and then eventually one thing, and then it's out, and then things change, and maybe that's just the way things will continue to change. It's a bit like evolution, I suppose. I mean, evolution is not a very gradual process. It tends to be gradual, then will be a big leap in evolution, then there'll be a few more steps, and another big leap, and things like that. And so, I mean, that's just I think the way humans are, and animals. I don't know why we're getting into Charles Darwin now, but that's just the way my mind works.
I swear he has an influence in crime novels, because if you kind of look at a lot of how criminals evolve, you could almost tie it into his theory in a way. But you could also tie it into a lot of other very kind of famous psychological experts too. I worked with kids that were at risk, and I did it during the pandemic, which I thought was a bit crazy because I was high risk the entire time. But I wanted to give these kids that were at risk a second chance, because there's so many of these learning assistants that don't kind of, like, I clued into it very quickly. Okay, I've got 3 people in this room who are acting out because they're going through stuff at home, or they're witnessing stuff at home that's, that we need to be paying attention to. And I was able to safeguard quite a few kids actually prior to the pandemic and then through the pandemic. But it was, for me, I went back because I wanted to do something. I wanted to do good. However, kind of with my health condition, I have idiotic rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
Which sounds like I'm saying I'm an idiot, but I'm really not. I actually had somebody say to me, "What did you say? Did you call yourself an idiot?" No, I didn't. They've changed that diagnosis title, I think, at least 36 times. And I've had that since I was 2.5 years old. So, like, for me, I've almost studied people. Because if you're forced to sit in a bed or in the chair for long periods of time, you end up, the only entertainment you really have is people around you. And I think that's why a lot of my characters have that really deep connection to the world and really deep sort of class connections, is because I've watched people and I've seen how people react, and that's why I find, like, yourself exceedingly interesting, and people that have gone and lived these extremely interesting lives, because I can tell you I've met some really crazy ass people over my 30 odd years, because being in and out of hospital, you know, it's not like you're in a single room on your own. You're in quads, or you're in like open wards where you're meeting like 20 to 30 people at a time. So, and I'm one of these faces because everybody thinks I sound like a kid or I look really young for my age. They congregate towards me, so I end up with all these amazing stories, and I end up with all these amazing life experiences, and it kind of makes me feel older than I am. But that's what feeds into my writing. Do you feel that about yours? Like, with all the vast people you've met and you've interacted with, do you feel like you've kind of absorbed all these amazing personalities into your work?
Yeah, I absolutely. I'm a bit of a sponge, really. I joined the army when I was 16, and I met characters from day one, and then probation after being at university for a couple of years. And being at university as a mature student was an experience which was both. Did
you get the look of the old man in the corner kind of look?
Well, no, because I was doing a social work course. I was actually one of the youngest on the social work course, but I was still on a camp, because you can't be a social worker until whatever age you are in the UK. So it's not an attractive profession for people to do straight from school, because they'll qualify, then they can't actually practice. And also the people who want to employ social workers have certain criteria, one of which is you must have life experience, because if you're in crisis, the last thing you want to be talking to is a 21-year-old straight out of school. So the social workers...
Yeah, I would have just walked out the room if that was the case. Yeah, so I get that.
The social workers are always the oldest people on campus. But I was one of the youngest social workers. I was straight out of the army. So that was a lot of fun. But I've got the weird kind of memory that if I saw you again in the street, I wouldn't recognise you. But I'll better recall everything we were talking about. I don't remember faces, but I can recall snippets of conversation and things like that. And whenever I need something in a book, just a fresh character, I'll just go into the memory bank and I'll pick him. He had a unique way of talking, which I think will come well across on paper, or it'll just be a phrase, or just something which will stick. And I'm assuming that as long as I've got that, I can always come up with characters who are. So you can tell them apart on the page, and a good test.
Yeah, and that's really important.
Knowing if each character's got a voice, is if you can actually have people talking to each other without using dialogue tags. And you take all your dialogue tags out of a big bit of dialogue, and if you can't tell who's talking, then all your characters are sounding the same, and you need to sort of have a think about that. And sometimes when I'm rushing, because my wife is normally the first person to read my books, and she will say they're all these two characters are beginning to sound the same. That's because I'm rushing the dialogue, and they're all talking like I would talk. And then I'll go back and I'll sort that out. So I
do that too. It's so funny. Yeah,
I take bits of everything, but I won't steal someone's life. That's something I won't. So if someone's had an awful experience or something like that, then I won't use that in a book, but I'll certainly use the way that they've described it, or the jokes that they made, or the moaning, or the way that they swear, or something like that. Then that's fair game as far as I'm concerned.
And I think writers, it is a lot about our life experience that comes onto the page. Because when I wrote Marie's World, I wrote it when I was very chaotic, and I had a lot of mayhem in my life, and particularly my sort of mental capacity at that time was chaos. And it really comes through on the page. And as I've sort of grown up and matured as a person and as a writer, you can actually see my voice change, almost to go from that chaotic, excited, over the top person to being this mellow person who can actually sit and put together a really good piece of work when I take my time. But I'm a bit like you, I rush, because in Shetland we had 1,000 words a second because that was how we spoke. However, you can't do that on a page. It doesn't work. So you have to slow it down. And writing really made me do that, was slow things down and sort of kind of get to that point. And the dyslexia was also a great way of kneecapping me, essentially, because I can come up with some great phrases. Like I will tell you this. I had a therapist in hospital, and I was trying to describe how I felt. And I said, well, it's like shotgun anxiety. Well, for the life of this guy, he could not get that out of his mind. For the whole time he knew me, every time he looked at me, he went, shotgun anxiety. And he went to teach his class, and he's like, I can't use that term in a class. And it bugged him because it described it perfectly. But he's like, you can't really use that term because then they're going to go out and use that term, and it's not maybe appropriate. So I have that way of, I kind of rub on people, and I kind of leave an impression. And it's so funny because I always think of myself as someone that can drift through life and people will not remember me. But I have found myself, I'll go into hospital where people don't, when you're at a hospital, you don't remember people because you see a million faces. But I have people that I maybe have met 5-6 years ago who I've totally forgotten because I'm constantly moving. And they'll go, oh my God, you're that girl from Shetland. And it's like, everybody then will remember me from like a phrase I've said or that way. And that's kind of what I try and hold on to as well in my writing, is the phrases or the little actions that make somebody who they are. And that's what I feed into my book. So it's so cool that you have that same kind of way of looking at it.
I try, even the minor characters, I try and give a bit of a personality, so as if they've got a backstory that can be quite interesting. And sometimes you come across, you'll invent a sort of a bit of gold, and you think, right, that character is going to be a recurring character now. And sometimes it comes from the most weird places. So I remember in Dead Ground, the fourth Poe book, when I was writing it, my friend had dared me to get the phrase bugger rumbled. Bugger,
like that.
Bugger, I've been rumbled. And he said, I dare you to get the phrase bugger rumbled in. So I thought, well, I'm going to do that. So I invented a sort of homeless guy who does street performance called Bugger Rumble. And it was so much fun to write this eccentric character, and
Yeah.
he's now a recurring character. So I've just written him into a new one, and he'll be one of those characters. Every couple of books, he'll crop up, and people like Bugger Rumble. Bugger Rumble. I'm even getting the name wrong myself now. And every book, he'll have a new bit of street entertainment, and it'll be a lot of fun, and it'll be an Easter egg for readers of the character and things like that. But it's all about it. You'll recognise it yourself. You'll have read books yourself when every character sounds the same.
I do. I'll get
haven't
confused,
been particularly well edited, and they won't do very well in the long term. Readers will turn off the series like that because
exactly.
I mean, you can usually tell with books whether a book's doing well by looking at. I'm gonna have to go now. That's for me, I think. Oh no!
Don't worry.
I
know that feeling where you're like, damn, the postman's here.
Well, the postman actually came 5 minutes before we're due to go on there, but we're expecting this thing between 11:30 and 1:30, so it could come anytime now.
I get that feeling. I'm the same. I actually put up a sign, because it was high risk COVID, saying, please leave the parcel in the porch. The amount of people that cannot read that sign and still ring the doorbell and then knock on my inner door it drives me absolutely crazy.
I mean, we had COVID, my wife and I. I was a judge at the Cumbria Food Awards, and it was the ceremony, and we were on like a super spreader table. I think because about 8 of the 9 people on the table got it. The only person who didn't get it was someone who'd already had it. Dave Meyer's one of the hairy bikers. Actually, I was sitting beside him. And it was
bikers are good for that.
It was fairly mild, and I'm considered a little bit high risk, but probably not as high risk as a lot of people. But when people were getting deliveries, we would basically stand at the door and say, "We've got COVID, so just leave it down there." And it was only about a month, maybe 5 weeks ago, and the attitude had completely changed. People weren't that bothered. Mm-hmm. They would step back, and then the Amazon guy, because he was coming every other day or whatever, he was asking us how we were. We were just standing so we obviously had Omicron, which is very contagious, and he was just standing a couple of yards away having a chat. He wasn't. So
he wasn't caring,
The COVID thing's been a weird thing. I remember when it first started, the postman was ringing the bell and standing at the bottom of the street just to make sure you were in. But now they're sort of licking the door handles and whatever. So
I get that. I get that really. But I actually have a challenge for you. I wonder if you can take somebody from Shetland and stick them in your book. I think that would be a challenge for you.
I don't think it would be a challenge at all. I could probably do it now.
Considering we're so eccentric.
The book I'm writing now is actually not a Poe book.
Okay.
It's in a new series, which unfortunately I can't really talk about because although the contract was signed last October, I think, they're not actually
I have that problem
with
my
they're not actually going to announce it until the back end of summer. And I'm not really supposed to talk about it because they want to do a big press thing.
Don't you find that hard though, being a writer, when they turn around and say, you can't speak about X, Y, and Z? Like, I couldn't talk about signing my first feature or my first TV series because they were like, oh, well, we don't know if we'll make it. And I'm like, well, I'm doing podcasts, so can I talk about it? And after a little bit of nudging, they kind of let me away with it. But I hate it.
I sort of know why. It's not my UK editor, actually. It's a new editor who wants it ready because it's still we're still going backwards and forwards in the editing. So it's quite a challenging process because the book it was actually a standalone I wrote, and I wrote it as a standalone, but it was bought as a series, so I've had to go back and rewrite it as a series. So I had to put a lot more flesh on the characters because they're going to be coming back. And also, I wrote it in 2015, and I'm now editing in 2022. So my writing has changed considerably. So there's that. So it's not ready yet. And she doesn't want to announce it until it is ready, because as soon as she announces it, there's going to be people from the film industry. There's going to be foreign publishers, and they all want to. They'll want to see the finished product. So that
exactly.
It makes perfect sense. And we were hoping to get it ready for the London Book Fair, but it couldn't be done. So we're now aiming for Frankfurt, which is October, so it'll be announced before Frankfurt in October. But
Are you excited
that's what
about
I'm
the book
writing now.
festival?
But it's not even set in the UK. This new series, but I'll
Oh,
still
cool.
get a guy from Shetland in it.
It'll be easy.
Yeah.
Trust me, there's so many. I think because we're Vikings and we're so eccentric, we all grow up with like learning how to make weapons, and we grow up with this kind of women are supposed to be women, so we have to learn how to sew and cook and knit, and it's very gender focused in Shetland, and I kind of hate that for that reason. But every guy knows how to make a sword, every guy knows how to make an axe. Not all of them know how to fight, which is hilarious because you'd think Vikings could fight. No, not the case. And they play rugby and they play football, and I can tell you the football sucks, but the rugby's pretty good. I'll give them that. The rugby's
I
pretty
mean,
good.
that's one of those things about the Vikings, this sort of myth of the Vikings, that they're all these mad warriors. And obviously, there were a lot of Viking warriors.
Most of ours are mad. No, that's true.
Oh, that's just a bit too violent for me. I don't want to do that. That sounds awful. I just want to do some cave paintings or whatever it is Vikings did back in Norway or Denmark or wherever they originated from.
The tapestries, that tells the stories. But I always thought it was crazy because what people don't realize is women were actually the most dangerous part of the Viking culture, because there was shield maidens, but there was also the women at home. And there's a story in Shetland that I'll share with you. It doesn't really get out of Shetland, so this is kind of like a breaking the silence speak. But women in Shetland at one point were actually known for killing foreigners or outsiders. So if you came into the island and they did not know you, so to protect the community, because the men were away fishing, they were away fighting, they were away battling, they would actually kill soldiers and then feed them back to their comrades. And then they would kill them and feed it to the next group that would come in, So it was almost like they wouldn't eat the people they've murdered, but it was like guests would. So it was almost like a way of feeding them up, waiting till their bellies were full and they were sleepy and they were drunk, do them in, and then just do the next, thing that happened. And that went on for hundreds of years, but it's not known about. And I find that fascinating.
I mean, George R.R. Martin did it in Game of Thrones, didn't he? Arya Stark. Fed some relatives to the guy she was after.
But it was so weird to me because women in Shetland, they're considered, old fishwives. They would gut the fish and they would take the fish into the market and they would feed their families, but they would also feed the community. So they always had this kind of romanticism about Shetland women, but there was those little pockets that were just really bat crazy that just would do anything to protect their island from outsiders. And that's where the xenophobia really started, and it's never really gone away up there. The sheriff came out and he made some very uncomplimentary statements in that regard recently, and he got pulled up for it. Saying that the only crime in Shetland is from outsiders, which is not true, by the way. It's not true at all. But he got lynched for that because Shetlanders don't want it to appear that we are xenophobic. But I wasn't. I was one of these people that if you were an outsider, I wanted to come talk to you because you were interesting, and you weren't going to have the same, I would say, rehashed stories that every other local had. And so I always thought that, but there's something interesting about you never knew. Might make you a bit more wary about Shetland women.
Thanks for that, Crystal. Well, I mean, I wouldn't go to Shetland anyway. It's
very long trip for you.
Violent. Anne Cleves has ruined Shetland for me. She has.
She's good at that. She is good at that, I must admit. But yeah, I got the title of Spitfire when I was growing up in Shetland because I was always very quick with my tongue, and my tongue was very much like steel, which used to get me into quite a bit of trouble. But I was well known for it because I was one of these people that I was straight to the point and I didn't like lying. And I would call people on it, and that got me into trouble. And my mother used to say, just go with the flow. And I'm like, I can't. I'm not built that way. So yeah, but yeah, no, I love that. So getting into the portion of books, as part of this podcast, what book have you read recently that stuck with you the most?
I think the book I've read recently that well, actually, if we're talking about the sort of last couple of years, it's We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker, which I thought was just absolutely phenomenal. And I read it, and I finished it, and I rang up Chris and said, "This is just mind blowing." And as soon as I read it, I thought, well, this is going to be my top 5 books of all time. It's just forever. This is one of those books that's just going to be up there.
Yeah,
that's the one. And if anyone asks me for a book recommendation, that's the book I recommend. And if they've read it, then I'm sort of stumped for the next one. I'll tend to just to go the one I'm reading.
Yeah, well, I'll recommend Fiona Cummings' new novel Into the Dark for you.
Yeah, I've got it. Because like I'm doing.
I went through it in like a week. I just blew through it. It was so good.
I haven't read it yet. The last one I read when I was 10. The last one because I blurbed it for and I'll read when I was 10 before we go into the event.
You should actually reread Rattle and Bone Collector first because it's tied into that.
I mean, it's one of those things. Is when you get to I don't want to say a certain status, but I mean when you excel a number of books. Then you get more blurb requests from authors. You don't have as much reading time as you used to. Most of us got into writing because we were readers first, and now
exactly.
You're living the dream, as it were, being a writer, and you can't actually read as much because you're getting stuff sent to you, and you're editing
edits
it's a favour for your editor because that means she can then send one of her books to someone else, and so it's a whole. Like internet,
it's an exchange
the whole
program,
network of favors, basically. But sometimes it does mean you get to read some books that you wouldn't ordinarily, and you get some absolute gems.
And that's how I found Fiona was a request from an editor.
I had a request. I already actually had The Collector, I think it was, on my shelf anyway. Then I got a request to read when I was 10. I think I'd already read another one of theirs before then. So we went back because my wife's a big reader of Fiona anyway. So the last one I read for proof purposes was Michael Robotham's new one.
Oh, okay.
Now, I've read a lot of Michael Robotham, but this is a new series. It's the third in a new series, the Cyrus Haven series. And it was absolutely spectacular. It was seriously good form. I mean, unsurprisingly, he's sold millions of books and he's won the Dagger twice. And I mean, he's
exactly.
a phenomenal writer. And I suppose this is the privileged position. Instead of going out and buying the first 2 in the series, I just said to his editor, "Can you send me the first 2 in the series?" Then they arrived within about 3 days.
Pretty quickly,
So I mean, I can't moan about being an author because you do get to do some cool things.
You do. You got because
Mick Herron's new book arrived today in a big presentation box with a can of beer and some crisps and a whole big fancy marketing thing, which is handy
because it gives you snacks while reading.
It absolutely does. But I mean, these are books I would have bought anyway. So I mean, it's nice when your peers
saves you money.
Are sending you books to read. But Michael Robotham, because I emailed him, I said, this is phenomenally good, Michael. I don't know why you want me to blurb it, because Stephen King and Mike O'Connelly normally blurb your books, but he said, no, absolutely. And he's reading mine in return. So, I mean, it's all one of those things. So Michael Robotham's new book is absolutely brilliant. It's out in June, I think.
Which is great, because this is coming out in end of August. So this is when this will be out, which is great, because it's like, it ties it in. And it was so weird, because when I launched this, I had no idea when I was launching. And then I got told, launch it in May. That gives you time to get everyone recorded, and then you're not like playing catch up, and you can do your edits and you can do your writing, but you can, get along with it. And it's so funny you say that, because I get arcs, not that often, but I get arcs for like Shirley Kennan came the other day because I'm spotlighting her. And then I had Fiona Cummings. She sent me, I think I've had like 3 from her now. And it's weird because it's such an enjoyment for me. And it's great because, like, for instance, last night I've got a World War II book that I'm doing, which is basically historical drama. I don't really romanticize history, because what's the point? I think that's just doing a disservice. So, I get authors that'll then say, hey, when your book's finished, before you send it anywhere else, let me read it first. And that it's almost like I feel like it's a badge of honor if somebody says that to you, because that means that they're saying your quality and your views is important to them. And that's so hard to find. But have you broken like a barrier of how many books you have in the house? Because like my husband went and counted on mine and I've hit 900 and I get the kind of look of, please don't get any more. Look.
I'm trying to be strict now, and I'm trying to replace all my paperbacks of books I want to keep with hardbacks, first editions, and things. And I'm in the privileged position that I can afford a lot of these books now. Paperbacks. I'm trying to keep less and less paperbacks as we go forward. So you can see my shelf behind. It's mainly hardbacks, but the lower shelves still do have paperbacks. Yeah, I mean, you could, and the weird thing with proofs, I mean, I must have like 200 proofs that I don't know what to do with, because you can't really put them on because they've got big not for sale.
No, you can't. No.
You can't do them at charity shops, and just throwing them away doesn't feel right. So, but I've got.
I'm with you on that.
My proofs, I use them because my bookshelves behind are actually quite deep. So I use them as spaces behind the bookshelves, so the books are all neat at the front. So I get to sort of keep them, but not actually have them on display, because I mean the sort of
they're proofs. Yeah,
you can be a bit weird, anal about proofs about books in total, can't you? I mean,
my
wife comes in.
I mean, my husband's like gotten sick and tired of building me bookcases. He really has. He's like, you need to stop. He's like, it's getting like ridiculous. But I love books, and I find it so difficult to let go of them, especially if it's an author I love. I want every book an author's written. And I think if before I kind of cark it, I'll probably will have enough to start my own public library. Well,
I mean,
much to his hate.
I'm trying to collect first edition Stephen King's, first edition Terry Pratchett's, any Ed McBain book I can get my hands on. I've got a few now. And I mean, Carl Hiaasen is one of my favourite authors, and I just bought all his in paperback. So I'm trying to replace all them with hardbacks, and
it takes time, though. It does. It takes a long time.
It's not something I feel as though I need to rush. Like I said to my agent, because my agent owns Goldsborough Books in London, so one of the most famous bookshops in the world. The biggest collection of signed first editions in the world, and I was saying I want to collect books, David, and he said, "Well, are you thinking a bond?" He said, "A bond. If you want a bond, first collection, first edition."
My husband shares his name, so yes, I know that one well.
It's going to set you back about 40 grand.
Yep, easily.
Which he said, which is fine if you. I'll start looking for you, and I thought, well, yeah, I'm not that bothered about them. I mean, I've read the Bond books and I like them, but they're not something I'm that bothered about. So I'll just. I think if you're going to start collecting books, which I am now, then you sort of find the ones that you actually really want. And at the minute, I want Carl Hiaasen, Stephen King, and Terry Pratchett. So they're the ones.
Well, I'll do you a favor. If I get my crime novel published, I'll send you a first edition of that.
Well, yes, as long as it's a hardback.
And then that way you've got something a little bit special.
Anything. So I mean, if it goes on the shelf, it normally stays on the shelf. But it's a nice hobby, isn't it? I mean, and it's something.
It's a nice hobby until you have to move house. and then it's a bugger, because you look at all the boxes and you think, oh crap. So who do you wish that you could sit and enjoy if you had time? Like, time was infinite. Is there like one author, or is there a series that you'd actually just sit and spend your time reading and enjoying?
Terry Pratchett's Discworld series.
My husband's favorite.
He's the only author I read again and again and again. My favorite authors I will reread from time to time, but Terry Pratchett I'll read the entire series probably once a year, I would say. And I don't normally mean to. I usually just think, right, my favorite book's Night Watch. I'm going to pick up Night Watch and I'm going to read that, and I do, and I think, well, I've got to read Jingo now. So I've got this weird order, and it's not in the order that came out. I'll just sort of work backwards. I'll go Night Watch, then I'll go Jingo, then I'll do The Fifth Elephant and then Men at Arms and then Feet of Clay and I'll sort of go backwards and I'll go forwards to Snuff and then I'll work on the witches and things like that and eventually I'll go on to the death ones and the Hogfather and all that type of stuff.
But that's good because it kind of reminds you of why you love it.
It does.
You know.
I mean, at the minute I'm rereading the Jack Reacher books. Really enjoying them. I haven't reread them for a few years now, so I'm reading The Hard Way at the minute. That's the one that starts off with.
I just started watching the TV version.
I thought the TV series was a really good adaptation.
I did too. Yeah,
captured the bit of fun that Jack Reacher. I mean, there's been a few. I mean, the Bosch series on Amazon Prime was an excellent, probably the best TV adaptation I've seen of books that I have read and enjoyed.
Yeah,
absolutely superb. But the Reacher book is really up there. And
I must admit, I'm putting off the Anatomy of Scandal. That's the series now.
Yeah, we just finished that actually. It's good. But
was it good?
Read the book. I've not read the book, so I don't know what people are saying that. I don't know what kind of adaptation it is because I've not read the book, so I can't tell. But as a TV series, it worked.
With your seal of approval, I'll be trying it.
It was my wife's choice. She has a knack for just like choosing things that are random that I've never heard of, and they're absolutely brilliant. So
yeah. Well, I made the mistake of watching Tiger King because I got talked into it, and I regretted it so bad.
Well, we started it. We've got about 5 minutes in. We're like, man, this isn't for us. So I'll just.
I stupidly watched it because all of my friends were like, "You have to watch it. You have to watch it." And I was like, you know, like
we were sort of like that because it took the pandemic for us to get our internet, so our broadband up to speed. So we changed broadband providers, and we got it because we couldn't have had any of the streaming services before then because our broadband was so poor. But we got that fixed because of the pandemic because we're locked down.
Stuck in your house, yeah.
We got Prime and Disney and all X, Y, and Z. And I made the mistake of putting on Facebook, you got any recommendations? I've got like 6,000 now. But Tiger King kept on coming up. You must watch Tiger King. It's hilarious. Yep. It's hilarious. And I put it on, I was like, nah.
Yep. No, I went the same way. But have you seen Making of a Murderer?
No.
I would recommend
it keeps on cropping up as a recommended thing, but it's one of those things with just our watch list on, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 streaming services now, I think.
Yeah.
I can't remember if we've got Apple at the minute or not.
It's crazy how many there is.
We've got Disney mainly for me because I like the Marvel films and Star Wars and a few other things.
So do I. Yeah.
But
don't believe Prime. The Viking stuff from Marvel.
We've got BBC iPlayer, which has got some phenomenal series on as well now.
Yeah,
so our watch list, there's about 300 things. It's like a Kindle. You're like 400 books on your Kindle, most of which.
No, I know that feeling. I'm always like trying to play catch up. Funnily enough, I watched the Shetland series. I struggled with it. I'll admit that. I did struggle with it. And I think it's because they made the place look so dreary, like just so dark and gloomy and grey, and it's really not like that at all up there. And because everywhere you look is bloody ocean. I'm not joking you on that. It's quite suffocating.
I mean, my wife just felt read the books and because she's a huge Anne Cleves fan and loved the series, although she was saying Perez is supposed to be Spanish and he's not a gingerhead Scotsman like he is in the TV series.
It just doesn't fit,
But for me, I because I hadn't read the books, I was able just to enjoy it for it was a sort of
what it was,
not a particularly taxing drama.
It's
mainly based in family dramas of the past and things like that, which I get a bit sick of after a time. I suspect the book. Well, I've read a couple of Anne Cleves books, and the books are superior in every way.
Yeah, the books are much better. Yeah,
because you can't possibly get the complexity of a 400-page novel into a 2-hour TV show.
You can't. Even a 6-hour TV show. But no, with your seal of approval, I'll definitely be trying the anatomy one. So yeah.
Yeah, it was good. Enjoyed it.
What author do you wish that you could sit down and have a conversation with, past or present, for any length of time?
Well, I don't want to say Terry Pratchett again because I feel as I've read that much about him. I feel as though
You know him.
I'll be too in awe of him to actually get anything out. I think I would go for Stephen King. I think I would just love to find out how his brain ticks, because he just flips genres at will, and whatever he does is just phenomenal.
It's like he touches everything. He touches is gold. You know,
literary events for me. One's the new Stephen King book, so I'll take the day off. I won't do anything. I'll just read the Stephen King book. The new Michael Connelly book. The new Mick Herron book, anything by Chris. So maybe half a dozen authors who I will just stop everything to read. Most of the authors I'll just go into the pile, and then I'll jiggle my pile depending on what I feel like. But Stephen King, I don't care what he's right now. He's got a new one out soon. It's called Fairy Tale. Don't care.
Could be interesting.
Reading the blurb, and there's very few authors I'll read. I'll just pre-order the book automatically. I just know I'm going to love everything.
I'm somebody that doesn't read the blurb, and I know this sounds odd, but if it's an author like I know and I trust, I won't read the blurb. It has caught me out a couple of times, especially if they've flipped genres and I haven't noticed that they've done that. And I'll be reading it and I'll be like, what the hell's this? Like, not what I'm expecting. But that's what I do. Like, I pre-order, like if I do pre-order, which my husband kind of sits on me for, but if I pre-order, I don't read the blurb. I don't want to know. I just want to jump in from the very get-go and experience it for what it should be. So that's kind of my way of doing it. But a lot of people don't.
That happened with Chris Brookmyre. Chris Brookmyre is a crime writer, but he wrote a science fiction book. And the reviews, a lot of reviews, clearly people who hadn't read the back of the book or even looked at the front of the book, which had a spaceship on.
Which was a bit of a giveaway.
This book's set in space. It's a science fiction book. So actually, some of his friends got some stickers made up with warning may contain science fiction on the front. Yeah. Because he's got such a big following. He's a bit of he's a million seller. He really is. Phenomenal writer. And a lot of people have just bought his book without actually reading it, and then out because it was in a genre that they don't read, which is a shame because it was still a crime book. It was just set on a space station.
Spaceship, yeah. So I get that. Yeah. I would have paused, but I would have, clicked a little bit more sooner than that. Is there an author, past and present, who you would say influenced, inspired, and made you excited to read, but also excited to write?
I'm going to be boring and say Terry Pratchett again.
You're not boring, don't worry.
Terry Pratchett for me had it all, because if you take out the fantasy element of his books, he's still a very, very clever satirist. His characters are incredibly funny, incredibly well written, and certainly Sam Vimes, who is protagonist when he's writing about the Guards series. He's not the only protagonist, but he's the main one. Certainly there are characteristics of Vimes that have sort of leaked into some of Poe's characteristics. The other
that's just good influence.
I admire is Carl Hiaasen. Now he's influenced me. He's obviously he's still writing now, although I don't think he'll be far from retirement, to be honest. He's certainly slowed down. But his way of writing low lifes is up there with Elmore Leonard. I mean, it's just incredibly. He's just got an incredible way of writing very, very funny, nasty characters who are going to come a cropper at some point in the book.
I think that's what keeps a lot of us going, is waiting for the cropper that they're going to get. They're going to get,
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. Loses his hand in accidents to get a weed whacker put on instead of a false arm. Just really, really funny,
bloody things. Yeah, no, I follow you on that
schemes and things, which is always fun to read about.
So, is there a book that you?
It's that humor, but I like the humor in books. I like humor in.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you on that.
And that's, I think if you add humor to a book, you can actually go a lot darker. It's easy to go darker in books because there's a laugh at the end of it sometimes, which brings people back out. If it's just unrelenting darkness, then it's quite a difficult read.
It's quite hard to keep going. Yeah, I would
It is.
agree
You
with
have to put
that.
down things like that. And if you have a series which is just unrelentingly bleak,
Yeah.
not everyone's going to stick with it, which is why I've made Poe very sarcastic. So there's a lot of humor in that. And I've made Tilly just over the top honest. So she will say things that are purposely designed to make people laugh. She's not a comedy character, and she's never the butt of the joke. But that is intentionally there to allow me to talk about some of the things I talk about, which is like people getting
quite dark stuff,
alive and or some.
I think that's good. I mean, that's what I've done in my crime. I've got this young detective that's attached to Seamus, and he just seems like at times he just gets himself in all these really wicked, stupid sort of situations, and they're funny, and it makes it lighter that you're following sort of Seamus, who's got this really struggle with his family and his past, and trying to. I would always say make up for what he's done or what's going on in the background, and it does, and it makes it lighter, especially with the fact that we're talking about 8 people that have been murdered in my book in one go. So it's smashing you in the teeth and then kind of getting you through to the end. So I get that. Is there a book you wish you could crawl into and live?
I wouldn't mind living in Watership Down. I'd want a longer lifespan than a normal rabbit, but that's my favourite childhood book.
It's a good one to live in. Yeah,
it just seems like a nice, peaceful way. I mean, I don't think I think I'd like to be the seagull, the one who swore, because rabbits have a pretty tough life. I mean, and that was expertly written in the book about how vulnerable they are. But they have this lovely little community, and they find somewhere nice on the South Downs to live. And I don't know if I want to be a rabbit actually, so I'm going to cancel that and just say somewhere else. But no, Watership Down. That'll be a nice.
Watership Down. You're going to stick with that one then.
I'll just be the one human who doesn't eat rabbits and just lives among, has loads of rabbit friends.
And lives among them. Yeah, I like that. So, is there a character you've read in a series or in a book that you wish that they had continued on or you could read more about?
I think Chris Whitaker, and We Begin at the End, Duchess Day Radley, who's his 13-year-old girl protagonist, with just such an attitude. She's just hilariously funny, makes bad decisions, but just sticks with them. Just such a beautifully drawn character. But he only tends to write standalones, so you just get this nugget, this perfect slice of whatever's happening in her life between then, and that's it. That's all you're going to get. But I mean, some of his characters, I'd say, Chris, I need more. I need to know that she's okay. I need to know what she's doing now, that type of thing.
No, I get that. Yeah, and I get those books where I'm like, please don't finish it there. Like, you just end up falling in love with them and you're just like, please keep going. So we're going into your writing stuff now. And this is the funniest part, I always think, of the show, because, writing is our lifeblood, and it's what keeps us alive and keeps us going. So how do you go about getting your darker elements and getting your mind into that position of being able to write those darker storylines?
I don't actually know. I'm a
it's a question and a half, isn't it?
I'm a professional writer, so I guess I just sort of sit down and I start writing, because saying I'm not in the right headspace or I've got a writer's block is just you can't do it.
Work.
I mean, I have deadlines. I have a team. There's maybe 30 people who are waiting for this book at some level, whether it's the printers at Clay's, or whether it's the editorial team, or the marketing team, or the publicity team, or the sales
Somebody's
team.
always nudging you. Yeah.
They need that book, so I don't have the I don't have the freedom to say I'm not in the right mood today. So
I think your background as well.
I have hit every deadline I've been set, because I don't think it's fair not to, because that messes up everyone else's timetables and schedules. So I just crack on. The darkness.
Do you
just
think
comes
that's maybe
naturally.
like your training from the army, and then your job is giving you that drive internally to kind of make sure that you're always writing and you're always doing what you need to do?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been in jobs that required a certain amount of discipline.
Yeah.
But I look at my books as my role in the books. I am one part of a big machine,
Yeah.
and the machine actually can't start work until I've delivered my bit. So I don't feel it. I have the right to delay it, so
Yeah.
that drives me. So if I'm a bit behind on what I would consider my word count, so I try and write at least 1,000 a day, and I usually
I'm the same. Yep.
hit that quite
Yep.
easily. But if I don't, then I will. And if I have to say stop for something, then I will try and make it up at the end of the week, because I know if I start a book, I used to start a book on the 1st of December every year, because I thought I can get 20,000 words down, have a nice break for Christmas, think about where the story's going, all that type of stuff, then hit it in the new year. And I know that if I start a book the 1st of December, I can submit it to my agent back end of summer quite comfortably.
Yeah.
And that gives us like 2 or 3 months leeway, because I would have a 1st of December deadline usually.
Yeah.
So I'll give myself a year to write it. And that's fine. That's worked quite well.
That's determination and real dedication and
I
discipline.
don't know. I
And
mean, if you're a
lifestyle
full-time
there.
writer, you should be able to write a book a year quite
Yeah.
comfortably.
I think it's when they start asking for like 6 or 7. Yeah.
Or something, or it doesn't work, or your editor gets it and goes, actually, I don't like this, or we're publishing something incredibly similar, we're going to need something else. That type of thing. So it's a self-discipline. It's not it's not a discipline imposed on me. If I said to my editor, look, this one's going to be 5 months late, she would have to say, well, okay, as soon as you can, because that's the only response that she could make, because they're making a lot of money for them. So it's not as if it's a failing series that they can just say, right, give your advance back and we'll just call it a day. They want more Poe books.
Of course.
So they're going to give me as much time as I want, but I'm also acutely aware that people do rely on, they have to plan their own work schedules
around yours. That's true.
I mean, for example, the Poe books, they have to, because they're all on audio, the time has to be booked in the studio and things like that. And if the book's late, then that studio time has to be cancelled, which has costs and delays somebody else who is going to the studio and all that type of thing. So there's a responsibility on me to do my bit. And so I ignore the sort of...
You are the first author to say that, and I am so relieved that you say that, because I always felt that way before I walked away. I took a 2-year break, but before I walked away, I always felt like, I've got to get this in on time, and I don't care if I'm missing out on family activities. I have to go get this done, because I don't want to muck up this year's list. And, you know, I admire the ones that do 6 or 7 books a year, because I certainly can't do that many. But to me, I think if you don't have that responsibility in yourself, how are you supposed to expect other people to? And you're not just doing a disservice to yourself, you're doing a disservice to the publishers, a disservice to your readers. You know, it knocks on. It's like a domino effect. So for me, I think if you're not internally disciplined, you're fighting a losing battle, I think. And that's not the way it should be. So what inspired you to pick up the type of writing style that you did? I think we kind of covered this earlier, but if maybe you want to add more to it.
I suppose I'm sort of known for having quite a accessible style, and that's probably been drummed into me from my time as a probation officer when I was writing those pre-sentence reports I was telling you about, because they had to be understood by everyone from Crown Court judges all the way down to the offender themselves. So they had to be written in such a way that they made sense to everyone who was going to read them. So I sort
and that must be very difficult.
It was, but you, I mean, the first few pre-sentence reports you have, your mentor in probation just says, no, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. And
a bit like an
you'd
agent.
also probably get into the habit of, if you thought a point was worth making, that was worth making 5 times. So getting that out of the habit. So once you've made your point, move on. And once you do that, then the pace automatically increases. And I tend to overwrite to start with. Then when I'm trying to reduce the word count, I'll look for words to cut, and that again strips down the writing and makes the books faster and things like that.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So it's just a style I've developed. It's funny actually because I'm editing a book I wrote in 2015 at the minute. So that's like 7 years ago, and I was a much more wordy writer then. So it's quite interesting to see, because when you're writing book to book, you probably don't notice it as much. When you're looking back 7 years, you think, blimey, that's quite.
Quite
I've
had that experience recently. Yeah.
So I was able to take about 20,000 words off the book, which is a fair bit.
Yeah.
You'll know.
So yeah, I had that recently.
And then you work with some pretty cool editors, and so everyone you work with is trying to make the book better. So I take the view
exactly.
that although I'm told it's my book and you do what feels right, I always listen to the people who are working on it, because
always listen to your
nobody's trying to make the book worse. Everyone's trying to make the book better. And also, it's a commercial business. It's got to make money. If it doesn't make money, then you can't keep doing it. It's all right dying for your art. But
starving artists.
If your book doesn't make money, then you're not going to be allowed to do it for much longer, because no one's going to publish it. So there's a bit of that. You've got to treat it a little bit like a business as well. You've got to have a bit of a commercial head on it. It sounds awful, but I mean, every author does it.
Yeah, we do.
So there's that. So I mean, you sort of you find a voice. You find a voice that you're happy with. You hope it's not too similar to someone else's voice. I mean, I've had to find another voice because I'm writing a series set in America at the minute. So I've had to find a completely different voice, which is quite interesting. I've done it now, so I was able to edit in the first.
Did it feel like a large leap?
Sorry.
Yeah. Did it feel like a large leap going from a sort of English voice and English sort of attitude to then obviously the American?
I almost exclusively read books set in America.
Oh, so right, okay.
It felt quite natural to me, actually. But so I've got a new voice for the new series, and then when I go back to, so I'll finish the book I'm writing now, which also includes editing the first one. So I'm writing the second in the series now. And then I'll go back to writing the Poe book, and it'll probably take me a bit of time to get back into the way of writing the Poe books. That's fine. I mean, I won't spend too long doing it, because, like I said, it's a business and people are waiting for things. So I can't just spend 2 weeks going, I need to find my inner Poe.
I know that feeling.
Eventually it'll come to me, and I can fix up the first mucky chapters in the first edit. I mean, that's absolutely fine.
No, I get that, because see, if I'm jumping between series, I know I don't have the time, so everything's broke down beforehand, so it's easier for me to sort of jump back in. So when you put your book together, or when you write your book, is it a movie that you see in your mind, or is it a jigsaw puzzle that you kind of have to put the pieces together?
It's a good way of saying it, actually. I sort of the way I work is I visualize a scene and I describe pretty much what's inside my head. Which gives me quite a cinematic
feeling.
Feeling, and sort of the way I sort of write is quite cinematic, which is handy. But I know that's not the only way. But I write it chronologically, so I start on page 1 and I just work my way into page 400.
I have to do it that way as well. I cannot do this whole jumping around thing
using like Scrivener or something, where you write one chapter, then you can move it. That wouldn't work for me. So I pretty much know.
It doesn't work for me either, so I feel you on that one.
I don't know how the book's going to end, and I know a few of the key things I want to happen, and I always know what's going to happen in the next chapter, because I'm working out in my head as I go along. So I never get lost. I never get to the end of one page and go, I've got no idea what to do now, because the way I'm.
I get that.
I'm nearly always seeding things for future books. In the current book, anyway, because I'm always thinking ahead to future books. Anyway,
is there a character that you have had that stayed with you the longest?
Probably.
It's not an easy question, is it?
Probably from my first series, actually, there was a character called Steel Eye Stan, who was a bouncer who'd lost an eye in a fight, and he kept on losing his prosthetic eye. So he when he went out,
Yeah.
he put a ball bearing in instead. So he got called Steel Eye Stan. He was such a fun
Yeah.
character to write. I've actually brought him back, and he's in the Poe series now. So he's actually jumped series. And
That's
so
cool. Yeah.
he's a fun character to write. He's a nasty piece of work, and every book he's in, he's going to get beaten up by someone. He's going to get hurt.
Yep.
It'll become a bit of a standing joke. But so he was in the second Fluke book, but he was in Dead Ground, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got a book out in June called The Botanist, and people will talk to me about it, and they'll ask me questions about it. The chances are I won't be remember because I've written 3 books since then. The way that my publisher works,
no, I'm the same.
once 18 months in advance, and by then I've moved on.
Forgotten it. Yeah.
The people who have read The Botanist know The Botanist a lot more. They know the book far better than I do. It's just one of those weird. Oh, that's a doorbell.
No, I do that too. I do. No problem. So what I do is particularly bad. I delete my books as I finish writing them, and that for me is the only way that I can do it, because when I come back, I am essentially the first reader to read it, and it's good and it's perfect. So I like doing that. And I think what a lot of Mike's saying is really good writing stuff, because you need to almost, as a writer, keep going forwards. You cannot always look back at your stuff and look back at your old stuff and think, okay, I could have done this better or that better. Writers are very much people who have to continually move forward, which is funny because my own personality, I always look back at my my life in a strange sort of adventurous way, and I look and I think of all the things I've gone through. So for me, that I would say is probably the biggest myth of writers, that we linger in the past and we linger in different scenarios, whereas for us it's all about kind of moving forwards and coming up with those ideas that are really important to keep our minds going, keep our activity going. And I think that's longevity as well. You need to be able to do longevity and to think over it. And that's good. So for you, is there a character you wish you could write more about?
So I've got a lot of editorial control at the minute, so I can pretty much write
good.
Who I want to write about. So my new contract doesn't actually specify which series, which my agent
that you can do,
was keen. So it's hasn't actually been announced yet, but it's for X amount of books over X amount of years, and it's up to me what I write. I will take people's views into. I mean, I don't want to just leave one series just to watch. Yeah. So I will write more Poes, certainly. I really like writing the Poe series. I'm really enjoying the new series, and it's quite refreshing. Because I've written 6 Poe novels on the trot. 9 short stories and a novella. So it's a lot of just being aside one person.
Of course,
and so it's nice to write the new series. It's just a little bit of a break. But I really do enjoy writing the Poe series. I like writing Poe and Tilly. I like putting them into scrapes. I like giving Tilly an impossible problem to solve. I like having some sort of a vicious dickhead that Poe can kick back at, and all these things that the readers love. I enjoy doing that as well. So I can pretty much write what I want.
You need a character like that, though. You know, for a series like that, you need somebody to be almost contradictive to your lead guy to make it interesting and keep the conflict going.
It comes back to conflict and obstacles and all that type of stuff. But I really enjoy writing the Poe books, and I enjoy the scenes where it's just Poe and Tilly just chatting about nonsense. So in Dead Ground, there's a scene where Tilly is trying to explain the rules of Muggle Quidditch to Poe, and it goes on about half a page. And it didn't
Yeah.
really add anything to the story, but it certainly added something to their relationship.
Humor.
So it stayed in.
Yeah.
It was quite a nice little sweet scene.
Yeah.
So yeah, just things like that, which are always.
Is there a technique you've tried that's worked really well for you, but is there a technique you've tried and you thought, what was I thinking?
No, I when people ask me what's my one tip, I'll say to when you finish writing at the end of the day, don't write and then such and such went to bed. Stop in the middle of an action scene or a bit of tension or something, because then you can pick it up immediately, and you don't need to warm your brain up. But I tend to not do that myself now. I tend to just to when my wife says, "What time are you going to finish?" I'm saying, "I'm just going to get this chapter finished, or I'm just going to get this scene finished, or I'm just going to finish describing this." For example, today, I will. My job today is to describe this really rough, sort of what you call a dive bar in America, I suppose, a really rough bar in the UK, and that's what I'll do today. And when I've done that, I'll stop. Technique wise, I've been doing the same since book one. It works. So I work out of a lever arch file, which has a collection of random ideas and lines of dialogue and bits of research I've done. Before I start the book, I'll put all into the order I think it'll probably come out in the book. I'll then start writing it. If additional scenes then occur to me, I won't put them into that draft. I'll start a new lever arch file of things to go in the second draft, and then so on. Eventually, I'll have nothing to go in, and that's when I know I'm done. And that's when I do my final thing, which is just to print it off and read it out loud. And then once I've read it out loud, it goes to my wife, who then says whatever she says.
Goes through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Then it goes off to my agent, who makes editorial comments. Sometimes he doesn't. Then it goes to my editor. It's interesting, my editor, actually, because my first book, The Puppet Show, had 2 pages of quite in-depth structural changes she wanted to do, from the names of characters to huge chunks of huge scenes. Which
I know those pages well. Yes.
or she didn't know. In The Botanist, the only thing she said was there was a lazy bit of writing where I said somebody snarled. Said that's just lazy.
Oh, you got pulled up for that, yeah.
All I did was I just changed. I added an exclamation mark to what he said, and I just took out the dialogue time completely. She said, why didn't you do that in the first place?" So I went from having all these big structural notes to pretty much nothing, and that's because I understand myself better now. I understand what they want, and I know what the readers enjoy reading, because it's what I enjoy reading. So I'm getting better as a writer. So my editorial,
it's to do with your passion and that coming through the page, and that's where you're really good at, and that's what I think you're really good at, is putting your passion in the words and in the page, and it really translates through. And I think that's what gets readers excited, and that's why they go out and buy your book, because it's, if you can translate that passion into the written word, then you're going to win every time. So moving into life. So this is about you and your life outside of writing and all the great joy of that. What's the first thing you do when you want to de-stress from editing or writing? Where do you go?
You see, I do get asked this occasionally, and I think it's a weird thing, because I'm doing what I've always wanted to do. I actually find it stressful when I'm not writing.
Which sounds weird to other people, but I get that. Yeah, well, I get that.
I don't feel the need to distress when I think it would be a bit, I don't know, a bit weird for me to say that I've got a stressful job, because I clearly haven't. I absolutely love what I'm doing. I look forward to. I try to keep it to Mondays to Fridays, so we're gonna have a weekend. But by
it doesn't always work that way, though.
My mind is on what I'm going to start writing on. Sorry, I'm going to have to go now. Oh, no.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine.
I'm just expecting one more parcel.
It's always that way, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I like cooking.
Oh, that's a good one.
I've always liked cooking. So I spend a little bit of time thinking about what to do and what ingredients I'll need and that type of thing.
Yeah.
I had a
That's a
Springer
good way to
Spaniel.
step away, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Springer Spaniel up until September last year. Unfortunately, he died.
Oh no.
But so I was taking him for a walk every day. I still tend to go out for a walk every day. I'll probably go for a walk this afternoon.
It's good for clearing your mind and
It
getting
is. I
those
do a lot of
juices
things.
flowing.
I solve a lot of problems I didn't even know I had plot wise, or I'll come up with
Yeah.
perfect lines of dialogue, or I've just written something in the morning. I think actually that's a much better way of saying it. So a lot of people, when
Yeah.
they see me out from a walk, my head's in my phone, but I'm not actually just like on Facebook. I'm actually emailing myself what I just thought. So I'll come back from a walk and I'll send myself like 7 emails.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I have
But
a notebook.
I
That's what
like,
I do.
I suppose like the usual things. I like going to the pub.
Yeah.
My local,
Very normal thing.
my wife and I like going out for meals. And we I suppose foodies. I don't like that term foodies, but we do enjoy. We enjoy all sorts of foods, but we like the finer, the Michelin starred stuff. And we're in Cumbria, which has more
Yeah.
Michelin stars than anywhere else in the UK outside of London. So we're quite blessed with nice things to try up here.
Yeah.
And also
That's really good, though. Yeah.
concerts. I'm still
You
going to see.
excited they're starting up again?
Yeah, we've been to a few recently. I still tend to like the bands I used to like when I was a young kid.
Yep.
So, I mean, I've got a Stiff Little Fingers t-shirt on at the minute. Now, I've been a Stiff
I
Little
had
Fingers
noticed.
fan
Yeah, I did.
since I was about 14 years old. Now, the singer, Jake Burns, is actually a reader of mine. He got in touch just to say how much he enjoyed my books, but he lives in Chicago. He couldn't get them, so
Yeah.
could I send them? So my publicist sent him books, and now he invites me backstage at the concerts and all these weird things.
Yeah, that's the best. Like I get that with the wrestling if they're in town and stuff. I sometimes get asked to come for dinner or I get asked to go backstage, and to me that it's a
such
good
a weird
mark.
thing,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I had Dave Myers, one half of the Hairy Bikers, out the blue, emailed me last week just to say how much he was enjoying my books, which I thought, well, my life has changed considerably. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else I do. Is distress. Well, I don't like the word distress, but what I do in my sort of time off. And the writing festivals, I attend all the big ones, and I enjoy catching up with all the writers because a lot of my friends are writers now.
Yeah, it's
really,
weird how
really,
we congregate. Yeah.
yeah, some really good friends I've got. So we're going down to London for the launch of The Botanist, and we'll spend a few days down there, and we'll catch up with a lot of people, and we'll go out for dinner with a few people, and then in
That's amazing.
October, I think it is, Capital Crime's on, so we'll go down there and we'll see a whole bunch of new people as well. And Harrogate.
So do you go to Bloodfest?
Sorry?
Or do you go to the crime one in Stirling every year? Is that when you attend?
Bloody Scotland. I'm not going this year, and I didn't go last year. I've been a couple of times. I did a panel with Peter Robinson last time I was there. It's a good festival. I enjoy it, but to me at the minute, because I'm committed to this new contract, I'm having to claw back a bit of time.
Yeah, of course.
So
yeah,
I would usually go to Bloody Scotland, and I would go to Crime Fest in Bristol. So I'm giving those two a miss this year. So I'm just going to be doing Harrogate and Capital.
Well, you're over up this way. I will take you out for a coffee because I like to do that if writers are coming up my way, and I always feel like it's a good thing to have. Yeah.
There is a crime festival.
I'm in Stirling now, so
you're in
I
Stirling.
live.
Right, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm even
moved,
though
that whole thing about moving,
so I live in Stirling, and it's so weird because Bloody Scotland happens literally 5 minutes up the road from me. So yeah, I always say, the door's open for a cuppa, and go out for a cuppa and just sit and chat, because it's great to catch up with writers, because you end up feeling less alone, and you end up feeling less paranoid a little bit, because it's sometimes very isolating to be a writer. I guess the next question is really not going to really stick in with you, because you're not, writing's your life. So I was going to ask, what hobbies do you enjoy, or ones that you wish that you could explore if you had more time?
Well, I mean, writing was my hobby, and it was weird actually, because when I replaced my hobby with a job, so I was writing when I came back from work, and then suddenly I was writing all day, and I had nothing to do at night, so it was weird, because I would get home from work and have a quick wash, and I'd write for a couple of hours and I'd have my tea and then blah blah blah, and then I'll be absolutely knackered.
Yep.
I don't know. If you're gonna force me into a corner at gunpoint, which I rather hope you won't, but I would say I would like to be.
I won't. Don't worry.
I would like to sort of specialize in one culinary bit of culinary magic. So maybe Indian cookery or Thai cookery or something like that. Something, or just to get better at something that
you make. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what that would be. I think I'd probably choose Indian cookery if I had to do one. Although I think Chinese food is so varied. You can have a different Chinese meal every night and feel as though you were having something different. Whereas Indian food, you're gonna have a curry, which I'm totally happy with. Actually, I'd eat curry every day. But
I think that's like a weird myth that's kind of being created around English people, that they really love curry. But from my experience, like everyone has such a wide variety of tastes in England because there is so much choice that it's not just like one thing anymore. There's so many choices in every town that everyone's kind of spoiled in that regard, because there's Indian restaurants, there's Thai restaurants, there's Chinese restaurants, there's Japanese, there's sushi bars. Do you know what I mean? It's so wide now. We can really just get lost in it.
There's a German restaurant in Stirling, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and there's some fantastic Italians.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean the food scene in the UK is pretty special now. There's a lot of street food, which is really interesting. There's a lot of craft beers as well. I mean, if I think about like 15 years, I mean, if you wanted a gin and tonic in a bar, you were going to have Gordon's or you were going to have Bombay. Now that you've got like hundreds and hundreds of things to choose from, if you wanted a beer, you were going to either have John Smith's or you're going to have Foster's. Now, you've got these incredibly small niche craft breweries. You've got some of the bigger ones which have done so well. They're now sort of big brands like BrewDog and things.
Yeah.
So it's a really nice time.
Well, you're talking to someone that grew up in Shetland, who Shetlanders actually bought their own rum distillery company in sort of the Caribbean. And then shipped it to their own islands because they wanted a specific type of rum. And, you look at the Shetland alcohol scene, it's exploded in the last sort of 10 years or so, because you've got Shetland whiskey and you've got Shetland beer and you've got Shetland vodka and you've got Shetland gin and I mean, it's absolutely crazy now, the alcohol that's coming out of Shetland. But what people don't realize is Shetland was originally a smuggling hub, right? So all those smuggling tunnels still exist. They're collapsing now, and there's people that are falling into them because they don't know that they're there. Nice. But these are actually part of the fabric of Shetland was alcohol smuggling. And I think that's, it's now nice to see it not being smuggled in on boats. It's nice to see it, for sale and people getting credit for the stuff that they're making. And it's regulated and it's all kind of done the right way. And I think that's really incredible. But I would recommend you try the Shetland beer. I think you would actually enjoy it.
If it's for sale over here, then
it's for sale all over the UK.
My publisher is always sending me champagnes, or was, but I sort of kicked back and said, well, I don't really drink that. So they tend to send me beers now, which is nice. And my wife buys me these like craft ale selection packs from all these little niche providers. So I get a selection of all sorts of things. So I'll probably add some. And I'll give everything a go. I mean, BrewDog did a Palmer Violet beer at Christmas, which was a spectacular failure.
I would imagine it would be.
Not everything works, but most of it does.
Yeah, I'm a coffee connoisseur. That's my my Achilles heel, unfortunately.
I've got a coffee named after my characters, the John Watts.
I'll have to try it.
Yeah, I'll send you a link after. It's a really nice. It's a blend, but I mean, it's what we drink now, just because it's weird. It's actually called Washington Po.
That is so cool.
Because in my books, Po went into one of their cafes, so they were like quite excited about that, and to celebrate Dead Ground last year, they brought out a line of Po coffee, thinking it would just be for the launch, but it was so popular, people were buying it from all over the world. So it's now a permanent.
Permanent
Line.
thing, yeah. That's awesome. Like, I know for me, I mean, I went to LA, and LA is a huge city, and I went there in 2016, and I was in Riverside. And for me, that, like, I got recognized in LA, and that's like the place of stars and all these big names, and I'm not a big name. I'm Chris, I was Crystal McCarrington. I'm not a big name, but I got recognized at Warner Brothers, and I got this VIP tour that was like completely different to everybody else's, because I got taken in to see the Big Bang stage, and I knew so much that the tour guide was like, "Why am I doing the tour? You should be doing it." But it was, it just happened that we walked into a fan of Marie's World, and it was super ass crazy to think that's had an effect on these people. And I mean, I took a very basic idea from Marie's World. I took twin sisters, and if you could imagine your brother taking your personal journals and your writing material and publishing it for the world to see, your personal inner thoughts. That's what Layla does to her sister. But she has no idea the knock-on effect that that's going to have on everybody else's lives, So her sister, who's made her name, gone all through this way of doing it, ends up having to go back to wrestling. She fought her way out of wrestling, and then she's dragged back in because she's got to protect her sister. So for me, it was such a small idea, but it completely changed the game for sports romance. And I hate the fact this class is sports romance, because it's not. It's a drama. But to me, working with like Joey Legend and working with these wrestlers, it was really nice to kind of humanize them a bit and take some of the myth away from wrestling. But at the same time, it's such a powerful storyline, and it's not done. It's not done anywhere else. I'm the only writer in the world to do it. And that was a bit of an uphill battle, and it still is most days. But I admire that, because I took a chance with it and I ran with it, when a lot of other people would have taken a look at something like that and said, "Hey, no, sod this." So yeah, no, I get that. So I have a long-term illness that makes me slow down and appreciate the day. What is the thing that makes you kind of go, "Oh, I like the smell of these roses. I'm going to slow down a little bit"?
I'm getting old.
That's not an excuse. I'm not letting you away with that one. I'm sorry.
I don't know.
It's a good question.
I tend just to work in big blocks, so I'll work all out until I've got a draft done. Then I'll have a break. And I'll sort of go away for breaks and things like that. Or my wife and I will plan a few days away. Or I'll have an enforced break. So I was doing a crime festival in Barcelona in February, so that was sort of a nice way to bookend things. And once you're there, once you've done the press interviews that they need you to do, and they've basically, my Spanish publicist was saying, "This is where you need to be on such and such a date. There's an event tonight which will come pick you up." After that, it's free time, so you can do
enjoy the place. Yeah.
So you do get a bit of time, just so when you actually physically can't get back to your computer to write, so you got no choice but to just stop thinking
Slow
about
down.
it. So a lot of it is why we tend to go away, because if I'm at home and I think of something, then I'll just go and write it. Doesn't matter what time it is. Whereas, I don't tend to consciously take breaks. They're sort of enforced upon me.
Yeah, I had to. When my disease got bad, I actually spent a lot of time writing in hospital. And if anyone knows anything about writing in hospital, you don't get peace and quiet to write. And that was what drove me. Was I spent like the past year in and out, and I wrote 100,000 words in my stay, because it was like, if you've got insomnia and you can't do anything else, you're stuck in a bed. You kind of go a bit stir crazy. So I wrote and I kept writing, and it got me through, I would say, probably some of the more kind of horrific things I had to deal with at the time. And for me, when I came out, I took time to convalesce. because there was nothing worse than I would get into a writing flow, and then because of everything I was recovering from, I'd end up falling asleep.
Mm.
And then I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh, fuck, what am I doing? And then I would have to start again. So in a way, my condition was like, no, you need to take 2 weeks or 3 weeks to try and get over this series of operations you've had. So for me, even when I'm in a hospital or if I'm on a book tour or if I go anywhere, the computer goes with me. So I don't really have that excuse to shut down at night and, not do it because the computer is there, and it's awful temptation. And also, I do not recommend writing in ICU.
No, I can imagine. I spent 6 months as an inpatient in hospital back in 2004. So I wasn't writing then, but I wouldn't have come up with anything decent. I know that. I mean, if I took my computer everywhere, then I would write everywhere, which is why I don't take my computer everywhere. I write in my office, and that is it. I tend to write Monday to Friday.
Yep.
If I'm writing at the weekend, it's because there's a deadline, or I've got press things to do, which I don't want to. I'm in the middle of a draft and it's going well, and I don't want to take time out of it to do press stuff, like interviews. Yeah. So I've got an article to do for the Crime Writers Association, 450 words by middle of May. Yeah. So I will do that the week. I'll probably do that this weekend, actually. Rather than do it during the week.
Do you find yourself taking the computer to bed with you sometimes? Like, do you get into such a flow that you take it with you?
No, It's a laptop, but I'm using it as a desktop, so it's all wired up. I've got a separate keyboard for it, so it'll be a bit of a hassle for me to take it. And that's intentional. Yeah. I've got my iPad. If I think of something, then I'll just jot it down as an email, or I'll scribble it into a notepad, and I'll print it off before I go to bed, so it's ready for me in the morning. Once I finish for the night, that's it. It doesn't mean I'll stop thinking about it, but it means
you can't.
I'm not physically writing it anymore. Which
yeah, I mean, there's been times where I've gotten ideas that, like, right in the middle of the night, and I'll sit up and I'll be like, I've got an idea. And Ian kind of does this whole, when you're driving in a car and you do the seatbelt thing, and you stick your arm out. So he does that to me, and it's like he sticks his arm out and forces me down and goes, sleep, because he knows that if I stick with it too long, I'll end up getting up and writing, and then I don't sleep, and then I crash. So he's almost gotten used to the whole sticking his arm out and going, no, you're going to sleep. You're going to stay there. You're going to sleep. So, because I get so obsessive when I'm writing something and I get so into it, he really has to remind me of things like, go eat. Have you had a shower today? Go shower. Like, he's almost like my personal reminder of, don't get lost in what you're doing, which I think is crazy because there's not many writers nowadays that can do that or does do that. So yeah. Well, my final question for you before we have our word game is, what's your favorite place to curl up in during the day? Do you go to the garden? Have you got cafe or reader's nook? Where do you go just to read and enjoy your book?
I've got a nice garden, so if it's the weather's right, then I will sit in the garden. And because my wife works for the book business as well, because we've got 25 foreign publishers now, and there's a lot of stuff that I was having to deal with that she now deals with. She does all the website, and obviously she was liaising with you and all this.
She's amazing. Yeah, I really like her.
So when we'll both read in the garden, but I've actually got a reading nook, which was a part of the living room, which had a dining table in, actually, until we realised that we never actually used it apart from Christmas, because we just sort of sit in front of the TV with trays like a pair of like tramps.
No, I do it too. Don't worry. It's just my hobby.
We bought this really nice bookcase, and I've got some of my special first editions, like my signed book from my signed Bruce Dickinson autobiography, and a few other special things like that. And I've got one of those expensive chairs that sort of you lean back on. It's got a separate footstool, and I've got a nice lamp. So there, that's my reading nook. That's where I tend to read. Although it's so comfortable, if I'm tired, I will just fall asleep. It's weird.
I do that too.
I could never fall asleep unless I was in bed. But that one little chair we've got now So yeah, so
You should try
that's where I read. But the garden's always my garden will be my preferred place every time.
Yeah,
I like
I
being
would as
outside,
well. But I'm in Scotland, so the weather's not always that great. So garden doesn't always get like
Look, I
top
mean,
priority
I'm
over
only
it.
9 miles from Scotland, so I'm not. It's not much warmer
You
here.
get more rain than we do. Because you're in Carlisle. Every time I come to Carlisle, it's raining.
It was snowing
When
last
I
week.
Yeah, like I came down to do a book tour, and we had been told it would be really nice that day, and we got drenched going from the bookshop to the car. The two of us were running like lunatics trying to get back to the car. We just got drenched. But yeah, Carlisle was my favorite stop on my book tour. There in Durham was my two best places that I did sales, so I was quite surprised.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean, I do a lot of work with Durham because there's a bookseller in Waterstones called Fiona who is a massive Hone Tilly fan. So
she was
every
a
time I
fan
got a
of
new,
mine as well. Yeah.
I'll talk to her. So every time I got a book out, she wants me to do a signing or an event. So I'm there the Saturday after The Botanist. So it's always my
Yeah.
first stop after the book's out.
I must admit, I'm looking forward to getting back to doing tours and signings. I must admit, my first place to go back to will probably be Durham, just because I love the atmosphere in that shop. And also, she brought me coffee. Like, instantly, she just was like, "What's your coffee order?" And I'm like,
Yeah,
"I like you.
she's pretty
You're
good, isn't she?
bringing me coffee." I have such a low bar for that. So, yeah. So, here's the word game. Now,
Right.
I chose a boxing theme for you. I
Yeah,
think my
this is going to go. I
father-in-law
don't know
actually
anything
has
about
a lot of.
boxing, so this will be fun.
I know it's like my father-in-law spent a lot of time in England, and for some reason he adores boxing. So every time I think of really talented English writers, I always think you guys are hanging out at like boxing matches for some reason. I don't know where I get that image, but I do. So
So that's
I
that's a
apologize.
weird one.
Yeah, I know. Like, I mean, you wouldn't think of a 5'1" Scottish girl hanging out at a wrestling show. I mean,
That's true.
it
Yeah.
yeah, it's sort of yeah, we all get weird sort of impressions. So the first word is boxing gloves.
I don't know. Well, I mean, straight away
I'm really throwing you for a loop on this one.
yeah. I mean, gloves off comes off. I mean, that's the thing, which is a phrase that I mean, which is a
Yeah,
sort of idiom now. So as in, right, that's it. Things are about to get serious now. So I mean, you could, I can relate that to any number of books where the protagonist has put up with as much as he can. So a lot of these spaghetti westerns, and that's obviously translates to a lot
yeah,
of books as well. Because a lot of the Jack Reacher books in particular, because the Jack Reacher books are westerns, really. So
yeah.
any one of the Jack Reacher books where he's like, right, but now I'm just going to go and kill everyone.
Yeah. See, like when I wrote that down, I thought of Yellowstone. Have you seen that yet? The Yellowstone series.
I've seen a bit. I'm watching Outer Range at the minute, which is just started on Amazon
I'm
Prime.
about to try that. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, we
So
watched Yellowstone
I've only
and we
seen the first
loved
couple
it.
of episodes. I think the third one's up now. It was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean Yellowstone is very brutal, and it's kind of like you go to that ranch, but you never really leave the ranch. And I think it's like the end. I call it the end of the world ranch in my mind. It's really worth watching. I think you would actually
Yeah,
enjoy it. It's three seasons, so
I
yeah.
watched the first one, but then you sort of you get overwhelmed with choice. I suppose. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember
that's what
Channel
happens
4,
to us.
and
Yeah.
then we had 3 channels, and one of them was shit. Um, so,
I know that feeling growing up with the British television. I'm with you on that. It's so weird you said that because no one else does. So next one is sweat.
well, I'm going to go straight to Carl Hyacin, the Carl Hyacin series, because he writes books exclusively set in Florida.
Yeah.
Usually about environmental crimes in the Everglades.
That's called the sweat box in my mind because of the heat and that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to Florida just as a tourist. Went to Orlando, and it was I got a rash up just because we're walking out, and we saw like the doctor at the park
Yeah.
said you need to get off your feet for 3 days. You've burnt your feet because all our pavements are white and the heat's reflecting up and burning your pasty
Yeah, that's
white
true.
ankles. Just
Yeah.
stop being an idiot. So
I
yeah,
bleached.
the Carl Hiaasen books because he portrays Florida so well, and it just sounds like a sweatbox and all the bugs and the creepy crawlies. Now I like reptiles. I used to be a professional snake breeder, so
cool.
I'm not scared of snakes and all the critters and things. But if they sweat,
Yeah, I worry about all the things that's trying to kill me that lives there. I think would be my.
Yeah, well, I mean, I spent 6 months in Belize when I was in the army in Central America, and that's the hottest, most humid place I've ever been in my life. And you were constantly like slapping yourself on the head because something had landed on you, was trying to bore into your
bite
ear
you or eat you.
It was just horrific.
You're a braver man than me, that's for sure. So cheering. Like crowd cheering.
I'll probably go for one of the Myron Bollitter books written by Mike Craven, because obviously he's a sports agent, Myron Bollitter, and he deals with sports stars. So one of the books where he's dealing with a tennis star or something like that. I don't know. I'm a big Colin Cobham fan. I've read all the standalones. I haven't read all the Myron Bollitter books, but I will. I'll get. I've got them all. It's just, like I say, finding space in your reading schedule.
Yeah, I know that feeling, and I think that ties in with the booing, which is the next word.
Usually, every time I walk into the pub.
Oh, I don't believe that for a second.
I don't believe it either. I lie for a living, don't I? Well, we both do. Booing.
I get booed normally because the boys come in and they see me in the backstage area and they go, "Oh, it's Crystal," because they know like there's not a guy there that can out-talk me. So,
I'm watching Rocky at the minute because I can't remember one of the channels on Sky has shown all the Rocky films. So I thought I haven't seen Rocky for ages, so I taped it and it's put them all. It must have been a series link. So I'm watching Rocky. Rocky 2 is on the planner. I'm sure Rocky 3 is going to be recorded. Then on Rocky 4, which I think is the one set in Russia, there's a lot of booing in that because the crowd, the pro-Russia, anti-America crowd is booing Rocky. Then he wins them round by being Rocky. So
that's a good one.
I'll go for that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so the next one is stomping feet. I always think of somebody getting jumped when I think of that, though.
I can't remember the Warriors, not the film, the book.
Yeah.
I saw what's it called? Forgotten.
See, I remember titles of books. I don't remember authors' names.
Yeah. He's got a complex surname. I think begins with Y.
Right.
Now the film is basically just a gang warfare film, but the book is a lot more subtle and nuanced, really about a lost youth, basically youth who were just fallen between the systems. So they're a lot younger in the book. They're all like 14, 15 years old, but they do a lot of stomping around and assaults, and they get stomped on themselves and things. So
What about heartbeats? I didn't say the game would be easy.
Yeah, I'm gonna say The Botanist, my own book.
Well, there you go.
Because we're designing a load of merch at the minute, and one for The Botanist, we're having somebody in the bed with one of those monitors, and it's flatlining.
I like that.
He's a poisoner, but he gives his victims weeks and weeks of warning. Said you're going to be next, and whatever precautions they take, he manages to kill them.
No, I like that. That's a really good one.
I took scientific advice.
So you challenged it. Yeah.
There's not really any poison in the world that you go like that.
Yeah, no, it's not.
You can take some poisons that are irreversible and that will kill you, but they're not going to kill you immediately. So most of my characters die in hospital rather than just like So
mental note not to read this one while in hospital would be a good idea.
Well, he's killing sort of unpleasant celebrities. So basically, just don't be an arsehole and you'll be fine.
And don't be a celebrity. Yeah, that sounds like good idea. Clapping hands.
Um, that's the same as cheering, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well,
I always
cheering.
think of wrestling in that one because I'd actually thought of my series for that because there's a lot of like people getting clapped on the back, and it's a very if you get clapped on the back in wrestling, it's kind of an insult. It's like, it's like somebody saying, "Oh, bless your soul," or
Mm,
"bless her." It's that way of saying you're an idiot, but without saying you're an idiot. So I always think of that when I do it, and I actually did it in the novel where Harold comes down the stairs and he kind of knows that his brother's bonking his wife, and he pats him on the back as he walks by as if to say, I know you. He's kind of calling
mm.
him on it in a way. So that's where I got that from. I'm a bit mean to my villain in that regard.
Well, clapping, you can also do clapping sarcastically as well, can't you? So I mean,
Yeah.
it fits any number of characters. The slow hand clap, yeah, well done, well done.
Yeah. I think that's a British thing
Lethal
as
Weapon,
well.
actually, the one in Lethal Weapon where there's a bomb at the start. It's not the first one, might be the third film, and
Yeah.
they're trying to defuse it, and they blow up the building, and they come out in the bomb squad. They're like, well done, yeah, well done.
Yeah, you idiot.
Back
Yeah.
in uniform. So it was
I like
Lethal Weapon
that.
3 because that's why they end up back on the street in uniform. Yeah.
Yeah. What about yelling?
Um,
I suppose that could tie into anything, but
it could, yeah. I'm reading. Well, I think it's called the Blade. The Blade itself, or something like it. It's one of the Irvin Welsh ones. It's the one where Begbie is. He's an artist in LA.
yeah.
No, he's one of the most violent, angry characters probably ever written in fiction.
Yeah.
But he's sort of he's a bit of an anti-hero, really, even though he does these horrifically violent things. But he spends a lot of time yelling.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll
Well,
go with
that's a
him.
good one. Yeah. It's a good
Yeah.
tie-in. So I like that. The final one is boxing ring.
Um, I'm going to go
So
for
this
a Guns N' Roses song called "Get in the Ring."
I like that. That's a good choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
"Get in the Ring,"
Yeah.
motherfucker. Which is basically about it's a song about anger, isn't it? It's a song about
Yeah.
them kicking it back about the people who have said things to them on their rise to being the biggest band on the planet, which they were at the time when they recorded it. And
I think they got
they
a
were
lot
basically
of
saying, "Yeah, well,
stick.
you
Yeah.
said that, but look at us now," that type of thing.
I
Um,
mean, I've seen that in wrestling. Like, they ended up taking on Guns N' Roses songs,
mm,
Metallica songs. You look at Motorhead. Motorhead did a custom song for Triple H, and he actually spent a lot of time with Triple H, and that's something that's not really known about. So when he passed, Triple H went to his funeral and he did a talk, and he talked about the times with him
mm,
and how much it really helped the wrestling industry. But again, it was like a hand in glove thing because the wrestling fans then attached to the music, and then it gave them new fans. So I think it was, I like that because song has a really important, I would
mm,
say, importance to us as writers as well. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I'm writing a certain series, I have a certain playlist that I'll listen to. If I'm writing like crime, I have very dark music playing to keep me in that kind of frame of mind so I'm not easily distracted. So yeah, I will play like a lot of Guns N' Roses and Motorhead. My husband actually loves Motorhead and Metallica and stuff like that. So I
mm.
kind of steal his playlist for that. And it works for me. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to see Motorhead loads of times. It was a very sad day when Lemmy died, and I've seen Guns N' Roses loads of times and Metallica a few times, not as many times. But
Yeah.
I have to have music on when I'm writing. I can't have it on very loud unless if I'm editing. I can have it on a bit louder, but I can't just write in
Yeah.
silence. Um,
No, I can't
yeah.
write in silence. I fall asleep. See if there's not music. I totally fall asleep. I'm awful. But yeah, no, I get that. But it's been great having you on the Book and Life podcast. I hope that this has been fun for you.
That's
I
been a lot
hope
of
you've
fun.
enjoyed this.
Thank you.
And, I'd love to have you back the next time you release your next one. And we can talk a bit more about that. And, I will give you a spotlight. It happens once a month where I will spotlight books and record books about, what I've, not record books, but record podcasts about what I'm reviewing and what I'm reading. And it's a good way to kind of just get you in the mix with some other authors that, you might not necessarily be attached to. And it's a good rub for everybody. So, yeah, we'll have to have you back. So you'll need to keep in touch.
Thank you very much. Let's do it.
No problem. It's been a pleasure.